Second day of the Rules Committee on Senate Bill number 1. I appreciate everybody being here. A couple more announcements, very similar to the announcements we had yesterday afternoon when we began our committee hearing. Today we're going to be continuing the discussion of a very difficult issue, and I understand there's lots of passion on both sides. As chair of the committee, it's my job to maintain decorum in this chamber, and as we hear from you, we have a lot of people to testify, and we want to hear from as many as possible. We have a list that we kept yesterday. We have a list of the folks that were on that list, some new additions to the list today, and the folks that checked in, so we'll try and move through that with as much dispatch as we can. We'll have the similar process where we try to limit the testimony, to 3 minutes, and the chair will use a little bit of latitude there when it seems necessary, but try and keep yourself to at least 3 minutes. And again, if you have come up to testify after someone who said exactly what you think, it's okay to say, I agree with them, or ditto, or yes, that's how I feel as well. It'll give opportunity for as many people as we can to have testify, because given the time constraints that we have and the number of people that are interested in this legislation who want to testify, we're just not, unfortunately, going to have the chance to have everyone testify. The gallery in the room must remain quiet. Accordingly, there should be no applause, booing, audible talking, or chanting. We want everyone to be able to hear. And it is also inappropriate to display any signs, as it impedes the view of those who might be sitting near you. We will conclude testimony today sometime around 11:30 and begin the discussion amongst the committee about amendments to the legislation, and with an effort to try and conclude around 12 o'clock or sometime shortly after 12 o'clock today. Having said that, we'll go ahead and get started on our testimony. And I'm going to, as I did yesterday, I'm going to try and call 3 or 4 people up so they can get in the queue, and that'll allow testimony to be a little bit more efficient. So the ones I have first that I'm going to call today, Elizabeth Prout, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, Elizabeth Prout, Kendra Brown, Sarah Lakin, and Elizabeth Eglin. Again, Elizabeth Prout, Kendra Brown, Sarah Lakin, Elizabeth Eglin. If you could all make your way up to this side of the chamber, my left, your right side of the chamber, and we'll have you testify again from the podium here, just to my left. I will also say, while we're waiting, we have received a good bit of written testimony that the committee members have received. They've got the opportunity to read over that, and will do so if they have not done so already. Ma'am, what's your name? Elizabeth Prout, come on up.
I'm finding it hard to be a mother to daughters lately. My daughters have brought me boundless joy and love, but I'm not sure how I'm going to protect them, and that is the sacred contract between a mother and her children. The people here in this room are debating whether the internal organs of my little girls should be promised to some person in the future, whether my girls agree or not. Reserved, like a parking space or a hotel room. The people lobbying you every day don't know my 10-month-old baby Lillian, who I named after the grandmother I lost in 2020. They won't be shepherding her through her challenges in life. They don't love her, but I do. And I'm begging you, leave us alone. Stop looking at these beautiful humans I love so much as necessary sacrifices for a cause. Stop deeming them less deserving of owning their own bodies than anyone else. Stop putting our families through hardships you won't even see. I've seen the debate about where the line in the sand is, when a person is broken and battered enough to give them their body back. That's the wrong question. People deserve to own their own bodies. People deserve to chart the course of their own lives, even if they are women, girls, and others who can become pregnant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Proud. Are there questions from the committee? Thank you for being here. Kendra Brown. Is Kendra Brown here? Sarah Lakin. Go ahead, Ms. Lakin. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman and committee members, my name is Sarah and I'm from the West Side. I am in opposition of opposing this bill. I want to share my abortion story. In 2009, I was a 26-year-old single mom of a beautiful 3-year-old daughter. We lived in a small one-bedroom apartment. I had a good job, working 40 hours, but could barely make ends meet. I was not receiving child support. I was on government assistance. We were on food stamps and also on child care vouchers. And I also want to stress during this time that I was taking birth control. I was on the pill. I was in no way, shape of wanting to get pregnant, so that's why my doctor and I decided it was the best course of action to be on the pill. I was not in a romantic relationship at the time. However, I was seeing a guy. We had sex once. This relationship didn't last, and eventually we parted ways. But a few weeks later, I became severely nauseous, and nothing seemed to help. Then fear came over me when a coworker of mine said, "Hey, you might be pregnant." But I told her, "No, I can't be. I'm on the pill. It can't happen." But sure enough, I took a test, and it came back positive. Without any hesitation, I knew I could not bring a baby into this world. I was barely hanging on mentally and spiritually. With my daughter, I had developed severe postpartum depression, which I became hospitalized for. Financially, I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I knew I could not afford another mouth to feed. I had no family or friends to support me, so long story short, the only option I had was an abortion. I chose to have an abortion. I called the clinic and scheduled my appointment. It would take 2 appointments for the abortion. The first one, the pregnancy would have to be confirmed with an ultrasound and heartbeat. Luckily, it was only 6 weeks. They could not find the heartbeat. I had to wait 2 more days for the actual procedure. But it was over, and I chose again to have that abortion. That was 13 years ago. I think about the abortion often, but I have no regrets because it was my choice. Today, I'm 39 years old and a stay-at-home mom. I have 3 amazing kids. I'm a loving mom to them all 3. I'm in a great relationship and have a loving and supporting husband. Again, I have no regrets with my choice that I made 13 years ago. Mr. Councilman and the committee members, I urge you to please say no on this bill. It is a woman's choice to have what should happen to her body and her future. Do not let this bill move forward to push a woman to force her into a pregnancy when she knows deep down in her heart she is not ready to do so. It is a woman's body, and she has the right to choose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lakin. Questions from the committee? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Eglin. After that will be Claire Stevens, Kathy Umbarger, Tracy Betts, and Cassie White. That's Claire Stevens, Kathy Umbarger, Tracy Betts, and Cassie White. Doctor, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Eglin. I'll Chairman Bray, members of the committee, I very much appreciate being able to share my perspective with you as an individual physician with both professional and personal experience with reproductive health care, intimate partner violence, and sexual assault. As the medical director for the Center of Hope in my healthcare system from 2013 to 2017, I brought our testing treatment protocols up to date with the CDC recommendations. I've done clinical research in domestic violence and taught other doctors about domestic violence as well. I've got an award from the Domestic Violence Network in 2014 for community engagement and advocacy. I was the only physician member of the Marion County Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board. This is all in addition to serving patients of all walks of life and ages in the Indianapolis area for over a decade. I also survived a psychologically, physically, and sexually abusive relationship during college. I couldn't say no to sex with a man who slept with a loaded handgun under his side of the mattress we shared. Even when I tried, he didn't listen. Rape within relationships is a shameful topic no one wants to discuss. Trust me, I've had a lot of uncomfortable conversations, and nobody wants to admit this one. I'd rather not be up here putting myself on the line, but it has to be said when people openly advocate for forcing 10-year-old girls to have emergency C-sections to deliver their rapist children in the name of God. I was lucky. I realized when my abusive partner started saying I should get pregnant that I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't keep myself safe. I couldn't let a child come into this relationship. I made sure he didn't take, hide, or tamper with my pills. I had support and money enough to get out of that place. I did not need an abortion. Later in my life, I suffered a miscarriage of a planned pregnancy. Because I received birth control, cancer screening, and preventive care at Planned Parenthood as a student, I knew it was an accessible, safe place to get miscarriage care. I could not be happier with the care I was provided there. I know others, both in my professional and personal life, who did have to face the choice of how to move forward after a devastation of unintended pregnancy. Luckily, they had the choice to start a family without adequate resources or support, or add to an already unhappy one, or not. Rape is not a rare thing. 1 in 5 women are raped at some point in their lives. 8 in 10 survivors know they're rapists. 2.5% are related to them. That's almost 11,000 Americans a year raped by relatives. Over 1/3 of sexual assaults on kids are perpetrated by relatives. So 1/3 of those forced deliveries would be products of incest, which is well recognized as a medical problem. Rape is traumatic. Incest is deplorable. Everyone knows that. What we don't think about is how common it is. Because of the nature of surviving sexual violence, because of the intense and ongoing shame, it's underreported and underrecognized. Every time a survivor is forced to relive the experience, it's horrifyingly fresh. Only to be able to access abortion by doing so is further victimization. Even with exceptions for rape and incest, an abortion ban would force more and more women to prolong the shame and trauma of rape and incest by living through a pregnancy conceived of violence. Making abortions illegal or harder to get to will increase medical problems as it has throughout history and all over the world. In places where abortions are restricted, more pregnant people suffer, more unintended pregnancies occur, and more abortions are done. More people will die. If your goal is to save lives, safe, legal abortion, as recommended by 78 American medical societies, is the way to do that. If an abortion ban is passed, the only way to put fewer Americans at risk is the inclusion in the bill of exemptions for rape and incest and removing the affidavit requirement that hinders access to care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ekelund. Are there questions for the doctor? Senator Taylor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doctor, were you
Thank you.
telling your own personal story?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I have a question about you, about some of your testimony. You talked about having a forced C-section on a child. Can you explain to me why you said that?
Because of the testimony yesterday.
Okay. So going back to that, the 10-year-old that we talked about, if she was forced to continue through her pregnancy, could she have a regular vaginal birth?
It depends. The things that make a girl start having her period might make her hips develop in time, but a lot of times girls aren't fully developed most times they're not fully developed by the time they start having periods. And girls have gotten raped and impregnated before they ever had their first period. So we can't say for sure what would happen, but as a doctor and as a woman, I thought that was horrifying.
Okay.
And I grew up in the Christian church. And I cannot understand how someone would advocate that in the name of God.
No, it's a difficult topic. It's very difficult for me too. But there are limitations that we may be discussing later on, and one of them would be that after 8 weeks, if you're, let's say you're 16 years old, and after 8 weeks, you were not able to have access to an abortion. And as you know, I don't know if you know the law, you have to be over 16 to consent to sexual intercourse in Indiana.
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I want to talk about the under 16-year-olds. In your practice, when do young girls actually come forward with their, on average? I mean, I'm not trying to tie you down to a
Not
number.
right away is the answer.
So what not right away would be after 8 weeks?
Yeah, it could be.
What about 12?
Yeah.
So in that scenario, if you've got a child younger than 16 who is the victim of a rape, and it's 12 weeks, and they can't get terminate the pregnancy, what's the option?
The government is forcing them to have a child.
Okay, and they are a child, right? Even by our own definition, haven't been able to consent to sex because they're under 16.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So now we've just so I understand from a medical process, what would you do currently? I'm not talking about after this, whatever bill we pass, but what would you do in that situation currently, under current law?
Where a person under 16 is raped and pregnant and came after this, well, now it's 20 weeks.
Yeah, I know.
So currently, I would recommend they go see someone who can provide abortion care if that's what they want.
Okay.
It's never anything we would force on anyone. We
Right.
ask people what they want.
You ask them what they want.
Absolutely.
Do you talk to their parents about it? If they're
After
under 16?
16, if they would want.
Under 16.
Under 16, I try to have adolescents in the room by themselves and talk to them first, and then see how much they're willing to talk to their parents about. A lot of times the parents are part of the problem with
Okay.
adolescents who are abused.
All right. I know these are difficult questions, but I'm just trying to come up with somewhere, as one of my colleagues said, somewhere to thread the needle here, because I think we're going to have some time limits
Yes.
on when these women can make their choice. So I appreciate your testimony. Thank you.
And medicine isn't straightforward either.
No, I know.
Senator Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Doctor, for being here. You brought up something that I think we need to unpack, and that is domestic violence.
Please.
Your work with domestic violence victims, survivors, how common is it for that woman to understand that she was raped? Do they frame it up in those words? So if in the language of this bill, how are we to help women understand when society has such a different expectation on what is the role of a woman in a domestic violence situation? Can you speak to that?
I can say that consent is very poorly understood in this country, and that is a big part of it, even in relationships that are not abusive. I can also say personally, I could not call what happened to me rape for years. Even though I have flashbacks and nightmares and remember screaming no. That's pretty clear. And I couldn't call it rape. Nobody wants to be a victim. it's very hard for women to admit, and especially girls, that they were victimized. So yeah, they may not call it rape.
Thank you.
Senator Landon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony today and your work with domestic violence.
Thank you.
Appreciate it so much. In that work, are you familiar with the term reproductive coercion?
Yeah, I've lectured about it.
Can you explain that to us and how that might interplay into this whole
Yeah,
issue?
I mean, so I mentioned some forms of reproductive coercion in my testimony. Usually it looks like a partner tampering with birth control that a woman has, gotten herself on to prevent pregnancy, of course. So it could be throwing away pills so she can't get them in time. It could be, there are some cases of people pulling IUDs of their partners.
Right.
Yeah, there are all kinds of different ways of doing that, but basically it's preventing access to birth control against someone's will.
In your experience and observation working in this field, is this just another example of control that's being exerted by the abuser over the victim?
Yeah, I mean, rape is a control issue, and the power is in the shame and not talking about it. So
Right.
nobody wants to admit that, and nobody wants to admit that somebody forced them to get pregnant. I mean, it's all about power and control.
Right. And has it been your observation that occurs both within the confines of a marriage or a relationship that's other than marriage?
Yes.
And in the bill, I don't think there's any exemption for a pregnancy that is a result of coerced reproduction. Is that correct?
I didn't see it in there.
Do you think that should occur?
I don't think we should have a ban.
Well, I understand. So you would agree that should be also included as a potential exemption if you're going to have this type of a bill?
Yes, but as Senator Yoder mentioned, someone who can't admit it was rape doesn't want to sign an affidavit saying it was.
Yeah. It's tough. Thank you
Even
very
if it's
much.
defined as rape by the law.
Yeah. Thank you.
Any further questions of the committee? Dr. Eklund, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy Umbarger is next on the list.
Thank you for the privilege of speaking to this committee. I really appreciate it. I'm Kathy Humbarger, and I have been a pro-life strategist working with several organizations over decades. I've had the privilege of testifying many times in support of common sense legislation to regulate the abortion business. However, after we passed legislation, the next challenge was to see that it was enforced, to see that the intent of the legislators that passed this legislation and the governor that signed the bill into law were carried out, because that does not always happen. If I were to write a bill with the intention of having it not be enforced, Senate Bill 1 would be the bill I would write. It is totally unenforceable, and as such, renders it basically worthless. So I am asking the members of the committee to please scrap this worthless bill and start over. You can and must do better. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Okay, thank you very much. Next is Cassie White, and after that, we will have Tracy Betts, Christine Hunsley, Haley Sanford, and Mary Brewer. That's Tracy Betts, Christine Hunsley, Haley Sanford, Mary Brewer. Is Cassie here? I don't see Cassie. Ma'am, what's your name? Tracy Betts, come on up.
Good morning. My name is Tracy Betts, and I am a law partner at one of the largest law firms in Indiana. And I'm a lifelong Hoosier. I was born and raised in South Bend. I grew up there. My dad owned a Dairy Queen, and I started working for him at 14. So I feel like I've been in business my whole life. And I've been a lawyer now for nearly 19 years. I went to college, was the first person in my family to graduate, then first person in my family to graduate from law school. And I am heavily involved in the Indianapolis business community. I serve on several boards. I was the former chair of Child Advocates and several other different organizations, and I currently also serve on the Public Defender Commission. I'm here today representing thousands of Hoosiers in the business community and in Indiana universities, Hoosiers that believe that a ban on reproductive rights is wrong for Indiana. There are thousands and counting of individuals who have signed an open letter that has been sent to the entire General Assembly, and it shows the signatures of those who have signed, and those names continue to be signed online at www.protectinghoosierliberty.com. You can see their names, and in many cases their employers and their universities. This is a bipartisan effort. This was not a political effort. These names come from all different parts of this state. They come from all different industries and sectors in this state. They come from university students. They come from business people. They come from men and women. They come from retired individuals. They come from our future leaders. We have had Republicans reach out to us to ask us if it was for them, and it is for everyone. And you will see their names on our list. And again, that list is growing. And it is important to note that there are many future leaders that are signing this letter. And it's very critical because we know in this time period that we are living, we're living in a world where people can work and live in separate places. And I am a recruiter at my law firm, and I hear this very heavily from the people who are coming out. When I interviewed at a law firm, I did not ask, what type of personal life will I get to have? What are your causes? I said, will you hire me? I will work hard. Nowadays, it is different. They need to know their employers support them. They want to live in an environment where they are backed. They want a government that protects their rights, not diminishes them.
30 seconds.
Indiana has had incredible success attracting people to come here by saying, this is a good environment for you to live in. We have a good cost of living. Come be with us. But that will change, and we fully expect that people will leave. I am a multi-state law firm. We have already seen that because we have other options where people can live and work. Where the state lands on this issue will be a relevant factor where people learn or want to grow and build their families. We know that in this state, more women than men attend college. We know that more women than men are graduating from universities. We know that more women than men are graduating from law schools and med schools. We want them to be here with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Senator Taylor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Betts, for your testimony. What I hear you saying in a nutshell is this is not something that you believe Hoosiers want.
That's absolutely right. We have talked to so many, and we have focused on the business community, going out there and finding where do you want to live and grow, and they do not want to live in a state where they are told how they should handle their health care, their private health care decisions. Yeah,
and kind of along those lines, so you believe, and the people you've talked to believe, that if we pass this legislation, there will be people who will not live or want to raise a family in a state that restricts these rights for women?
We absolutely know that. In fact, one of the driving forces of people signing our letters were people telling us that their college-age children have already told them they do not want to come home to Indiana to live and raise families. We've heard that from a lot of people.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Yoder.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your testimony. My question is to follow Senator Taylor's question, but really, our colleges and universities being able to keep our students here. We've already seen a drop in higher education in Indiana, and now parents and individuals are asking, what are my rights in this state? will you be protecting my daughter so she can make the decision that's right for her? So what I'm hearing you say is parents and individuals are asking different kinds of questions, not just what's the reputation of the college or university, but will my daughter have personal autonomy, be respected, be able to have a choice and access abortion care should she need it in that state? Is that what I'm hearing you say with colleges and universities in Indiana having a concern?
That's absolutely right. When we're talking to people about our letter, which has been a grassroots effort, we are hearing that people are saying Indiana has a chance to set itself apart from the other states that are doing this in this area. And we have seen Indiana fall before on mistakes that were embarrassing when we weren't making decisions that computed with people's personal autonomy. And they do not want to see that again. They absolutely do not want to see that again. And because Indiana has this chance to do better, they are hoping that they will take that chance and do something that protects autonomy.
Because really the bottom line is the question, will you respect me or will you respect my daughter enough to respect whatever choice if she would find herself in that situation? Because I can look at other states that would respect her or recognize her own bodily autonomy, or she herself could make that decision herself. And I guess you could make that connection why people would choose to call Indiana home or move to Indiana. People can pretty much work from wherever, and if that is a question that individuals are asking now, that should very much inform how we proceed. So whether it's where do I want to live or where do I want to study, those are two really important questions. I really appreciate your testimony. I haven't actually gotten that list or the letter, so I'm not sure if it came to my email.
We'll be sure you did.
Okay.
I'm sorry about that. We'll make sure you do.
Thank you.
Senator Landon.
Mr. Chair, thank you for your testimony, Tracy. And I'm interested in your comment about, following up on what Senator Yoder was talking about, it impeding our economic development, in essence, for the state of Indiana. And because I've heard this comment about people saying, you know, I don't want to go to a state which adopts policies such as what you're looking at here in the state of Indiana. And I have found, and I'm just going to guess here, based upon you saying you've been an attorney for 19 years or so, you're probably in your early 40s, is that correct?
I am 42.
Okay.
Not afraid to say it.
You're a professional and you're talented. And it seems to me what I'm hearing folks say of that age many times, and I know we can't, make a blanket statement here, but I think it's fair to say that the thought, and you can either tell me if you agree or disagree with me in here, is that it looks like Indiana and these other states, but Indiana is trying to turn the clock back 50 years. And is that because that's in fact exactly what we will be doing if we pass this type of legislation?
Yes, it does very much feel like that for many people, but I can also tell you that this is a matter of access to health care. And so it's not just a matter of personal autonomy, it's about being in a state that people can actually have good, high-quality health care, and that is very hard in situations where health care is being limited by your government. People need full options to health care. I myself had a very life-threatening pregnancy. I almost died multiple times during it. I would be very afraid to have had that life-threatening pregnancy in a state that doesn't recognize me as a full, independent, autonomous person. That child has lived, and I am so thankful we were both okay. But it was also a very terrifying time. I cannot imagine going through that under these circumstances.
Senator Bassler.
Thank you for your testimony today. We appreciate you being here. When you think about the continuum from conception to, say, the day after a baby is born, is there anywhere along that continuum that you think abortion should be prohibited?
So I'm here speaking for a multitude of individuals who have signed a letter, and our letter does not take a position on that because it would be unfair for me to do that. I'm one person, and I don't want to be unfair to the people who have signed my letter. What our letter says is a ban on reproductive rights is wrong. And that is what this bill is. This bill is a ban on reproductive rights. I'm a lawyer and people come to me for legal advice, and I hope that they listen to the legal advice I give, and they don't always do that. I look to doctors to tell me about medical advice, and I hope that people listen to their doctors when they need medical advice, not their government.
So any type of ban on abortion?
Indiana already has laws in place, and again, my job here isn't to say whether the law that's currently in place is the right one. But what we are saying is this bill and a ban on reproductive rights that stops people from being able to get the health care that they need, that's wrong.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cassie White, is Cassie White down here now? Don't see her. Christine Hunsley is the next to testify. After that, it'll be Haley Sanford, Mary Brewer, and then Lakimba Desadier. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Members of the committee, I will be as harsh as truth and uncompromising as justice. William Lloyd Garrison. Because the sentence against an evil deed is not executed speedily, the heart of the children of man is set to do evil. Ecclesiastes 8:11. I start with scripture because both the U.S. and Indiana Constitution declare Almighty God to be the giver of rights and civil government the securer of those rights for us and our posterity before we are even conceived. I was going to expound on how insulting it is that women are considered too weak or stupid to be accountable for their actions. Instead, I'll address the penalties, or lack thereof, for the paid assassins, the serial killers with one name, Ulrich George Klopfer, one of America's most prolific killers with a collection of trophies that make Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer look like children with butterfly collections. Perpetrated much of his bloody rampage right here in Indiana with impunity. According to Indiana's own final report on investigation, Dr. Klopfer performed tens of thousands of abortions over the course of 3 decades. A Post-Tribune article featured in the Chicago Tribune, October 25th, 2019, brings his death toll to at least 50,000. Life advocates, assisted by pro-life attorney Sean Sullivan, director of the Life Center next to Klopfer's abortuary in South Bend, started learning of Klopfer giving the pill without the girls knowing. On Black Friday, 2014, one girl said she wanted to rethink her choice, but he had already given her the pill. We audio taped them on the phone saying they would give the pill on the first visit. We filed over 45 examples of patients he was giving the pill to on the first visit. Public records show 47 complaints, one of which is mine, RE not reporting abortions in minors. The health department wouldn't budge. After a bunch of back and forth between Sullivan, ISDH, and AG Hill, Sullivan wrote a letter to then Governor Pence threatening a lawsuit. Finally, in November 2016, Klopfer's license was indefinitely suspended, citing at least 5 charges, or at least 5 violations. No charges were filed. The fact that SB1 holds no criminal penalties unless the babies are killed in a way to enable organ harvesting leads me to admonish you. You are tasked by God to be a terror to the evildoer, Romans 13. Not only should we be prosecuting the assassins going forward, but we should be charging the ones that are practicing their dark arts in the here and now with crimes against humanity. When does apathy become aiding and abetting? Abortion must end now, amen. Please strip this bill and replace it with the language from the Nisley-Jacob Life Bill. I have copies of these if anybody is interested. Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, Haley Sanford. After that, Mary Brewer, then Lakimba Desadier, and then Courtney Milbanks. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the chamber, of the committee. My name is Haley Sanford. I'm from Brownsburg, Indiana, and I had an abortion in 2016. and it was nothing more than a basic healthcare decision. It was expensive, and there were lots of hoops to jump through, but it was worth it. I'm unapologetic about getting an abortion because it was right for me at that time in my life. As a child of teen pregnancy, I know firsthand the trauma inflicted upon children born to parents who are not ready. When you're a kid, there's nothing you want more than to feel emotionally connected to your parents, but mine were not emotionally mature enough to give me that. My brother and I, just 19 months apart, lived with my grandparents while my mom worked multiple jobs and went to community college. We barely saw her, and when we did, she was exhausted and emotionally unavailable. My father was encouraged to get his college degree so he could provide for us. He said he'd come back on weekends to help, but instead he pledged to a fraternity and had the college experience my mother only got to dream of. They married out of obligation after he graduated and divorced 2 years later. And I want to pause here to say, I had opportunities as a white middle-class kid in small-town Indiana that not everyone is afforded. I had a village that helped raise me into the person I am today. Not everyone is so lucky. The childhood I experienced set me up for an adulthood plagued with abandonment issues, substance use disorder, anxiety, and depression. When I got pregnant, I knew that if I carried to term, I'd risk repeating this traumatic cycle. There were days throughout my childhood that I wished I hadn't been born. Perhaps had that been the case, my parents would have gone their separate ways after high school and lived up to their full potential. Perhaps my dad would have taken that out-of-state basketball scholarship and excelled in his career. Instead, he became bitter and angry and was verbally abusive. The alcohol fueled that fire even more. Perhaps my mom would have gone into the nursing program at Ball State and traveled the world helping people like she always dreamed she would. Instead, she missed out on most of our childhood so she could work straight through to get her LPN, then consequently lost her nursing license after a car accident left her dependent on opioids.
1 minute.
I keep in mind that had I not grown up this way, maybe I wouldn't have had the insight to choose a different path when I got pregnant. But I did grow up like that, and I did choose a different path, and I chose myself. Had I not had the choice, I wouldn't be the mother of 2 beautiful babies now. Their existence is a direct result of me being able to choose when and if I wanted to be a mom. I had the opportunity to heal and grow from my childhood trauma so I could be emotionally available for my children. Without the right to choose, you are forcing people into carrying more than a pregnancy to term. You are forcing them to stay in abusive relationships, to hand their babies over to strangers, and to take matters into their own hands. The consequences of this legislation will be deadly, and it will be on your hands.
Are there questions from the committee? Senator Taylor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a comment. You know, I hear people come up here and talk about making decisions to have a child. I think that's one of the easiest decisions, especially for a male, is to have a child. One of the toughest decisions is a decision that you made. And to me, it's like if you have a history of abuse in your family, physical abuse, and you stop the cycle, you don't produce the same results. You don't show your children that violence is the way to get your message across.
Right.
So for a young person to come up here and bravely talk about the decision you had to make at that time is very courageous. And I congratulate you and glad you have, you said you have 2 children?
I do, yes.
Yes, and isn't it a blessing?
Yeah, they
All right,
absolutely are.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Haley Sanford? Oh, that was you. I'm so sorry. Okay, just a moment. Let me keep my list in shape. Do you see that? Stop. All right, just a moment, if you could. Do we have, is Mary Brewer up there? Mary, would you come up? Ms. Stevens, we'll get you in just a moment, okay?
Hello, this testimony concerns SB1 of the special session. I recommend it be withdrawn as it has too many flaws to move forward. Please substitute a bill that completely bans abortion without exception. A complete ban on abortion is something that generates much discussion, as the details are critical. In order to understand some of these medical details, I consulted a physician from Warsaw, Indiana, Dr. Christopher McGarrah. While patient care duties have kept him from testifying at the hearing, he documented some salient points for consideration by this committee and General Assembly as a whole. Life begins at conception, ends at natural death. Abortion and euthanasia are physical and physician-assisted suicide are not allowed by the Hippocratic Oath and ought not to be allowed in the state of Indiana. When confronted with the scenario of a complete ban on abortion, many Hoosiers raised the question about cases where the life of the mother is in mortal danger. Dr. McGarrah proposes a discussion to work through this seeming dilemma. Abortion has, as its primary goal, the killing of an innocent baby. It deserves to be prohibited. On the contrary, a fetal maternal separation operation has as its primary goal the saving of two lives, the mother and the baby. This delicate surgical procedure ought to be condoned where appropriate. Our current medical technology is wonderfully advanced. Sadly, it's not as a state of sophistication where all separated babies will survive. Medical technology is not static. It progresses at a rapid pace. Someday there will be a microsurgical technique and an artificial uterus to support all babies separated from their mothers prior to birth. But until that time arrives, physicians must try with available technology. Just think how many lives would be saved if there was an Operation Warp Speed for fetal maternal separation research. An abortion and a fetal maternal separation are two entirely different procedures. An abortion is never to be allowed. A fetal maternal separation is to be allowed legally and morally when the lives of the mother and or baby are in true mortal danger. Skeptics will want to know how to prevent the fetal maternal separation from being co-opted by those who embrace the culture of death. That concern, Dr. McGarrah points out, has a solution which can be found in the brilliant actions of the 1973 Indiana General Assembly and former Governor, Dr. Otis Bowen. Faced with medical malpractice crisis threatening to destroy access to quality and cost-effective medical care, the idea of the Medical Review Panel was born and enacted into code. The same concept of a medical review panel to examine every fetal maternal separation to ensure the selection criteria and surgical medical techniques were to meet the reasonable standards in place could succeed in persevering the intended integrity of the fetal maternal separations. In summary, abortions are never to be allowed, but the lives of mothers and babies can and will be saved by pursuing the concept of the fetal maternal separation. Thank you, a concerned Hoosier mother and taxpayer.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Okay, thank you so much. Ms. Stevens, we'll get to you in just a minute. Is Lakimba here? Would you please pronounce your last name? I'm pretty sure I'm not doing it right. Yes, sir. Desideer. Okay, I knew I didn't, so my apologies.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Lakimba Desideer, and I represent Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates of Indiana. We rise in strong opposition of SB1, a cruel, barbaric, and outright abortion ban. The government should not be interfering into our medical decisions. Every person in Indiana should be able to make their own decisions with their health and their bodies, and that is including abortion. It's a matter of integrity, dignity, autonomy, and freedom. Senate Bill 1 is an extreme abortion ban that bans the care of stages of pregnancy with limited exceptions that are vague, difficult to access, and the amount to the right in name only. Even with limited exceptions, providers will be forced to risk prosecution and/or jail time. The chilling effect of the potential jail time or loss of the medical license will lead to fewer medical professionals offering life-saving care. Even these exemptions are overzealous. Prosecutors will likely target providers for all abortion care, putting both providers and patients at risk. Passing this bill would be undemocratic, shrieking the will of the majority of people, of the extreme and vocal minority. A poll that was conducted in Indiana just a few weeks ago showed that nearly 3 out of 4 voters say people should have access to all reproductive health care, including abortion. And that is 84% of Indiana's voters. And they want lawmakers to focus on addressing state economic conditions rather than passing new laws to ban abortion. I must say, this is including 70% of Republicans. So the question is, why are we here? We certainly aren't here to make pregnant people's health better. If this bill passes, people will be forced to carry pregnancies against their will. People will have to travel hundreds of miles to get basic health care. And people will be unable to access necessary life-saving care and will die as a direct result of this bill. Despite Indiana's dire maternal health outcomes, especially for Black women, lawmakers insist on passing a tax on abortions that will continue to make up this public health crisis worse. Experts predict that if Indiana passes the outright abortion ban, we will see a 21% increase in the number of pregnancy-related deaths, and even higher 33% increase for Black women. These numbers are unacceptable. We should not let our lawmakers take away our control over our own bodies.
That's 3 minutes.
And risk our lives in that process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ms. Day-Sidier. I was wondering, in the language of SB1, it will prohibit abortion clinics from doing surgical abortions. Can you explain, as a representative from Planned Parenthood, what kind of regulations that you have to abide by Indiana law currently, and why such a restriction on abortion clinics would impede Hoosiers' ability to access reproductive health care and abortion care in Indiana, further restrict?
Thank you, Senator Yoder. I will be very direct with that question. Indiana already ranks number 2 with restrictions with regards to abortion care under Louisiana. So we're already at the top when it comes to restrictions. And as I mentioned before, any additional would just be causing a rise in deaths when it comes to any personal beliefs with regards to health.
Thank you.
Senator Taylor.
Thank you. A couple questions. Ms. Day-Sidier, does Planned Parenthood do anything other than abortions?
Yes, sir. We are a health care provider.
And so what kind of services do you provide at your clinic?
We do pap smears, we do mammograms, anything. We also provide gender-affirming care. So we are a complete health care provider for our services, with our services in our clinics.
So let me just ask you a couple questions about the health care provisions, or what the health care, who primarily utilizes your services? Is it wealthy people with insurance?
Everyone We are a provider to everyone. So folks that have insurance and folks that don't have insurance, and those who have Medicaid.
But where do you see the most?
We see low-income folks and
Okay.
people of color, sir.
So these services that you provide to low-income people
And rural communities as well, sir.
and rural communities as well. I was going to get to that. You were a step ahead of me. So I want to talk about this insurance thing because from what I understand currently in Indiana, insurance can't pay for an abortion.
That is correct, sir.
That is strictly prohibited in Indiana, am I correct?
There is a law that states that we are not getting any money from the state of Indiana for any abortion care. That is correct, sir.
So it kind of intrigues me that we're here as a state even talking about this issue because, as you stated, we already have, how many times do you have to come to the clinic before you can get an abortion?
You'll have to come in first for to get an ultrasound, and then you'll have to come back after that. So it could be 48 to 72 hours. So you're making at least 2 visits.
And so on that first visit, what do they have to tell you according to Indiana law?
They'll also have to provide the ultrasound to the patient for them to come back to make a decision if they want to continue to have the choice of having an abortion.
So let me say that, let me go back. So we got a law that says insurance can't cover it, so you're paying out of pocket.
That is correct.
We got a law that says you must come twice. The first time you take an ultrasound and they have to tell you that this fetus has a heartbeat, right, or whatever. You have to say certain things. Am I correct?
That is correct.
And then you have to come back again to get the procedure done.
That is correct.
It sounds kind of tough. So if you want to make this decision, you know you're going to pay for it, you're going to get told what you're doing, and then you're going to have to come back another day. So that's, pretty tough. And then now, if you move these procedures, would hospitals have to go through the same procedure?
I'm not aware of that answer, sir.
Okay. I don't think anybody is, because I think that hospitals that provide indigent care would have a different start. So, you provide birth control at your Planned Parenthood?
Yes, we do, sir.
Do you provide IUDs?
Yes, we do, sir.
Do you provide condoms?
Yes, we do, sir.
That's part of, do you provide sex education to teens?
Absolutely, sir, yes.
So it seems like you're doing a lot to prevent unwanted pregnancies.
We are doing a lot to make sure we educate folks, our constituents, to make sure that they have all the options to decide what their choice will be.
Right. And then if they decide to pay for it and go through this onerous process, then and only then do you provide the procedure at your Planned Parenthood.
That is correct. And we try to provide resources, not just the information, but finance if we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Bassler.
Yeah, just real quickly, thank you for your testimony today. And it's really the same question I had a few minutes ago. When you look at the continuum from the date of conception, let's say, till the day after delivery, what is your opinion or your organization's opinion? Should abortion be prohibited at any point on that continuum?
We believe that every individual has the choice to decide when they should have an abortion, if or when they have an abortion.
Even up till the date of delivery?
We believe that each person has the option and choice to decide, and that is a medical professional, but that's between the individual and their doctor to have that answer.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next witness, Claire Stevens. After that, it will be Courtney Milbank, and then Carrie Bennett, and then Isabella Zollner. So Claire Stevens now, Courtney Milbank, Carrie Bennett, Isabella Zollner. Ms. Stevens, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Bray and members of the committee, for allowing me to share my story. My name is Claire Stevens. I am testifying in opposition of Senate Bill 1. In October 1997, at 16 weeks gestation, my parents discovered they were to have twins. These twins were diagnosed with TTTS, or twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, at McGee Women's Research Hospital in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. TTTS is a condition of the placenta in which common blood vessels cause one twin, the donor, to be starved of nutrients, and the other twin, the recipient, to have way too much. These twins, my sister Maggie and I, were given a less than 20% chance of survival, likely with severe handicaps or birth defects, fatal fetal anomalies. After receiving this news, the maternal fetal medicine team of doctors sat down with my parents and laid out several options. By far, their number one option was termination, aborting us. Second was selective reduction, choosing to kill either me, the donor twin, or Maggie, the recipient. The team's last resort was a surgery they deemed too high risk and was not offered by McGee Women's. It was a laser surgery, a life-saving surgery pioneered by a surgeon named Dr. D'Elia in Chicago. After my parents researched TTTS and this surgery on their own, it was the only option that made sense. They brought it back to the team at McGee, who mocked them for researching themselves and called them crazy for trusting Dr. D'Elia. Again and again, the doctors pushed and pressured our parents to abort us. 3 times a week, Mom went in for an ultrasound, and 3 times a week, these doctors would emphasize that it's not too late to terminate the pregnancy. It's not too late. Even after having had the life-saving surgery at 21 weeks, even after my parents repeatedly said it's not an option, still the team pushed for abortion. Sitting in the waiting room, Mom would listen to the technicians argue about who would have to take care of her. Every visit was so defeating because my parents knew the doctors were against them. They were scared, but they were stuck because they needed these doctors to deliver their babies. No other hospital in the area was equipped to work with such a high-risk pregnancy. But despite the high risk of fetal anomalies, despite so much pressuring and coercion from the doctors, Maggie and I were born at 35 weeks, completely healthy, without any complications. We are both now proud to be registered nurses. The doctors got it wrong. And we are not alone. According to the Twin-to-Twin Transfusion Syndrome Foundation, there are at least 4,500 TTTS cases per year in the U.S. alone, involving at least 9,500 babies. Spontaneous and elective abortions before 20 weeks are not counted by the CDC, meaning this number of TTTS babies is even greater. I represent thousands. Born with a fetal anomaly or not, don't our lives have value? I oppose Senate Bill 1 because I believe moms and babies deserve actionable legislation for real protection. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you coming here to testify. Next, Courtney Milbanks, then Carrie Bennett, then Isabella Zollner, then after that, Cassie Bear.
Thank you, Chairman Bray and members of this committee. I'm Courtney Turner Milbank, an attorney with the BOP Law Firm, a firm that specializes in constitutional law and represents numerous pro-life groups, including Indiana Right to Life and National Right to Life Committee, who oppose this bill. I will also be providing written testimony. Parts 1 and 2 of that testimony detail the legal landscape surrounding Roe, Casey, and Dobbs, and what legislation pro-life groups suggest. Part 3 of that testimony, which will be my focus today, details the numerous problems with SB1 and the necessary revisions. I understand there are many on this committee that are committed to the pro-life movement's cause of providing substantial protection for innocent unborn life, and I commend you for those efforts. Unfortunately, SB1 utterly fails to do so due to the numerous and pervasive legal flaws and omissions, which were inevitable when you consider that this bill was drafted without the assistance of Indiana Right to Life or other pro-life groups. SB1 is a wolf in sheep's clothing and is certain to result in continuing abortion on demand in Indiana. There are 4 provisions that illustrate this point. First, there are no criminal penalties except for D&E abortions, partial birth abortions, and those done without the consent of the woman. There is also complete immunity for all other kinds of abortions. Taken together, these 2 provisions provide no criminal penalties, and even if there were some, absolute immunity for all other types of abortions, including chemical abortions. Second, SB1 eliminates from the consent requirement that a woman's consent be given if her life is in danger. In practice, this means that a doctor could abort a woman's baby without her consent or even over her objection. Third, the combination of a few sections makes clear that SB1 expects abortion clinics to flourish in Indiana. when it suggests that you are to impose licensing requirements for both existing and future facilities. If abortions were truly limited to the exceptions outlined in SB1, they would be rare and only done by mainstream hospitals and mainstream physicians in hospital settings. There would not be the necessary framework to sustain a necessary framework for licensing of abortion facilities. Lastly, SB1 turns a blind eye to the biggest enforcement problem on pro-life laws: prosecutors refusing to enforce them, as Marion County's prosecutors already confirmed he will do. Unfortunately, despite this well-known problem, SB1 does nothing. Our specific recommendations and necessary revisions are contained in Part 3 of my written testimony, which I will provide. In sum,
15 seconds.
IRTL opposes SB1 and urges the Senate to pass truly pro-life legislation. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from the committee? Senator Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For good testimony. I'm scared to say this, but I think we agree on something. I thought it was interesting that a doctor could provide an abortion over a woman. When your reading of that part of the bill says that the doctor does not need the consent of the mother to actually abort the child.
Correct.
Can you think of a scenario where that might happen? Let's say the woman's unconscious and the baby, she's bleeding out and can't, should the doctor do it in that scenario?
I think if that's the scenario that the Senate is considering, then that should be explicitly stated in the bill. It should not provide a blanket exception for any time a woman's life is in danger that they don't have to obtain the woman's consent. I also think that there are a number of, we could impose advanced directives options for a woman being able to express that prior to going into a surgery that may be risky or something like that. But as written, this bill makes clear that a doctor does not need her consent if her life is in danger.
So, if the doctor considers that she's going to be bleeding, she's unconscious, and you do understand that could make the doctor violate their Hippocratic oath, which is to, save the life of the mother in that scenario.
I understand the scenario that you're discussing. Unfortunately, this bill would need amendments in order to affect that situation. It cannot contain a blanket exception that any time a woman's life is in danger, that the doctor doesn't need that consent.
Okay. So we need to cover that part because that could happen. And then I want to talk to you about this pro-life. Do you believe Indiana Hoosiers are pro-life on this issue?
I do.
Based on what?
I can get you the studies and surveys. Indiana Right to Life will be able to provide those to you of the information that they have that suggests that Indiana is truly pro-life.
And so when you say Indiana is really pro-life, what do you mean by that?
That unborn babies should have substantial protections and that abortion should be banned.
Right, but I'm saying Indiana, you're saying Indiana is pro-life. Survey results that I've seen, even coming from my colleagues, show that a majority of Hoosiers who take these surveys want to leave the choice up to the woman and her physician. Have you seen those?
I think surveys can be done in a manner that will get them to say both sides, any side can get a survey to say what they want it to say.
I agree.
And Indiana, by its elected representatives, it shows that Indiana values life. By the people that they have put on the Senate and put in the House, they have shown based on that they support life. Now, I will also say that there are surveys that have been done in an objective manner that we could provide to you that will show that citizens believe that there should be a ban on abortions here.
So you believe through Hoosiers voting and the people they've elected to office that they've shown they're pro-life?
Absolutely.
So why did the people who they elected that were pro-life write a bill that you're disagreeing with?
I would ask the same question, but I believe that there are many in the Senate and in the House that would take our suggested amendments and revisions and make this into the bill that it needs to be, or scrap this bill and submit a new one that actually provides protection for innocent unborn lives.
Yeah, and I agree with one part of your statement, not the second part. The interesting part, though, when people say to me that Indiana is pro-life, it kind of disturbs me, because if you look at absolute numbers, Indiana is probably more conservative state than a lot of states. But for some reason, we have difficult times passing these very, what I consider to be very conservative issues, even the one we have today. I think we're still going to have some problems going forward. But you bring up an interesting point that through the ballot box that people actually elect people who believe the same thing that you do. Did you survey the members that you believe people voted to find out what their stance was on this pro-life situation?
I did not. I'm an attorney and I represent my client.
I didn't say you, I'm saying did the pro-life, did the Indiana Right to Life, do they ask members about their stance on the pro-life?
Absolutely, and I would be happy to provide that information to you.
Oh, I would love to see it. You talking about the information about who said that they would support this?
I believe that information is provided.
Okay.
I believe that's provided in our endorsements. It
So
would suggest that Indiana Right to Life would not endorse a candidate that would not agree.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. That's why I wanted to know who you endorsed, because it seems to me...
That should be a matter of public record.
I didn't get it. Sorry. But it should be real simple. As a matter of fact, if we were so pro-life, as you suggested, I would have figured we'd have had a trigger or something like that instead of spending $300,000 to come here and do this. But you, in your testimony and or at least in your answers, provided me with some good information that you believe in the pro-life, correct me if I'm wrong, should there be exceptions? What is pro-life stance on the exceptions in the bill?
Our stance on the exceptions is that they are woefully fall short of actually providing safeguards necessary. I know that Corinne Youngs yesterday spoke about the vagueness of those exceptions, and we fully support that. There are some very vague terms in here. We also believe that there should be a life of the mother exception.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Not health?
I believe a life of exception when the death of the mother is at risk.
What if the health of the mother is at risk?
No.
Okay. What if there's rape?
I believe that if there is a rape and incest exception, that you need necessary safeguards, including reporting to law enforcement. I believe that this is not just important for this bill, but also protect the women and children that are in those circumstances, that they have the protections that they need and are not thrust back into the hands of their abusers.
I would agree with you, and I think that's what I said earlier. I agree with you. So you are okay with the rape and incest exception?
Indiana Right to Life believes that all life is valuable, all unborn life.
Even if it's a result of rape or incest, that life should be preserved to birth.
All unborn life is valuable.
So then you don't, unless you have safeguards, you don't want rape or incest.
They believe that all life is valuable.
And then last but not least, what's in the Indiana Right to Life position on the number of weeks that a woman should have to make a decision?
Indiana Right to Life would provide that there should be a complete ban, except to prevent the death of the mother.
Okay, the death of the mother, not the health. I'm glad, okay, so we got that cleared up. All right, thank you very much, all right? And you look familiar.
Ms. Milbanks, a quick question. With regard to your statement about the bill not requiring the consent of a mother to have an abortion, that actually is in current law as well, is that right?
That is correct.
And in fact, I think it reads, the woman submitting the abortion has filed her consent with the physician. However, if in the judgment of the physician the abortion is necessary to preserve the life of the woman, her consent is not required. Is it possible under that scenario where something would be so important that it needs to preserve the life of the woman that she would not have the ability to give consent because she might be unconscious or in such duress that she can't communicate that?
I believe that if that's the situation that the SB1 is trying to target, that it needs to be amended to target that situation.
But that's also in current law, right?
Just because it was bad law then doesn't mean it's not bad law now.
Okay, thank you. Are there further questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Yoder, please.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And my question is a couple of concerns. One is, how do you determine that the threat of death is imminent with the life of the mother, if this is your only exception? I have learned that a woman can lose half of her blood volume, and I know you're not a physician, but I just want to make this point, before her vital signs show any reflection of that. And by the time her vital signs do show and reflect her having lost half of her blood volume, it's too late. So at what point, if it's this life exception, which I heard wasn't very clear, even how you articulated it, what's the line for you? Like, how threatening is threatening enough? How sick is sick enough?
So we'll be happy to provide the language that we suggest for this section, but it would have to do with reasonable medical judgment. And again, I don't have the specific language in front of me, but there would be some specific and non-vague language to make clear what situation a doctor would have to, what things a doctor would have to consider, and what situations would be fit into that category.
So you acknowledge that as an attorney, you're not in the best position to make that call, that medical providers, physicians would be in the best position to make that call. Not you, not her, not the government.
Correct, and that's why I think strong language needs to be in place to make absolutely clear what doctors are supposed to do and what they should consider in that situation.
Even if that strong language is in opposition to what physicians are recommending.
It should line up with their, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Your strong language, you're saying it should be strong, even if it goes against recommendations by physicians themselves. Best practice.
The language we would recommend would suggest that a doctor needs to determine in their reasonable medical judgment whether that woman's life is actually in danger. How is that different than what's in this bill or what's in current law? I believe what's in current law should be very similar. But I would also suggest that they should also have language in there that if a doctor does provide that an abortion is necessary to prevent the death of the mother, the necessary safeguards for the unborn child also be in place. That includes a second doctor on hand to take care of that child, that a doctor should deliver that baby in the best possible chances for that child to survive. That should also be in there.
My other question is about voter turnout in Indiana, which is not really what you brought up, but it made me think about your statement saying with such certainty that Indiana is a pro-life state based on who serves us. You know what gerrymandering is?
Yes.
Well, how we have our districts drawn, it doesn't necessarily reflect the electeds based on the values of a community or of a state. Are you aware that Indiana has some of the lowest voter turnout in the United States?
I'm not. That's not my area of expertise.
Senator Yoder, I'd ask, let's try and keep it to the subject matter at hand, please.
Well, it does. It does directly impact how our electeds reflect our state's values. Because we have such poor turnout, what happens is in our gerrymandered districts, we become a very extreme state. And what you are suggesting is quite extreme, and I would suggest that perhaps doesn't reflect Indiana? I know that we have heard, you even said, we've got surveys and polls that aren't to be trusted, but you're going to supply some that show a different turnout of what Hoosiers believe.
Some surveys cannot be trusted. Some can be done in an objective manner to ensure that the results are accurate.
Are you suggesting yours are?
Absolutely. I would suggest that we would not provide any survey that we did not think was objective and done in a proper manner.
But you are suggesting that others would.
I'm not calling anybody out specifically, but of course, then there's always people in the world that do bad things.
But not your organization. I think before making those claims, I think it's important to recognize that our voter turnout in Indiana is abysmally low, and we need to do a better job. And you are correct. We are here because we don't make voting accessible, and we need to do a better job in Indiana so that our electeds reflect what we heard earlier, that 84% of Hoosiers support access to abortion care.
We would disagree with those numbers, but I understand your point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Charbonneau.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quickly, thank you for being here and thank you for your testimony. As we all know, after a day and a part of a day testimony, this is a very, very emotional and very polarizing issue, and we look for a way to find the proper place to land when we're working on a bill like this. If the options were something similar to what we have here versus nothing and coming back in January and taking a fresh look at this, where do you stand on that?
I believe that if senators and House members would honor their commitment to what they have stated they will do, that we have what we can, the numbers and the people to pass truly pro-life legislation, and I would urge you to do that now.
I'm sorry, I don't think I understood your answer.
I believe it should be done now. I believe it should be done right, and that we could do it now as well.
Okay, and right is according to Right to Life's view. I understand that. But there are other pretty diametrically opposed views. And if there's something in between there, are you going to be okay with that?
I don't believe there is an in-between. I don't think there's any position in the middle that either side will be happy. Okay. I think that this Senate should pass truly pro-life legislation, and I believe that we have provided you the tools to do so.
Thank you.
Senator Glick.
Ma'am, are you familiar with Section 12 of the bill? It's on page 9. All abortions performed on and after the earlier time of a fetus is viable, or the time the post-fertilization age of the fetus is at least 20 weeks, shall be governed by the Section 1 of the chapter, performed in a hospital having premature birth intensive care units, unless compliance with this requirement would result in an increased risk to the life or health of the mother, and performed in the presence of a second physician as provided in subsection B. Subsection B says an abortion may be performed after the earlier of a time a fetus is viable, or the time of the post-fertilization age of the fetus is at least 20 weeks, only if there is an attendance of physician other than the physician performing the abortion, who shall take control of and provide immediate care for the child born alive as a result of the abortion. So there is a provision here for the treatment of the child at that stage.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
understand that?
Yes, ma'am, there is.
What's vague about that?
The issue here is that you have no enforcement to actually enforce this provision. You've imposed no criminal penalties, and you've imposed absolute immunity for any doctor that violates this section.
So you're going to invite a police officer to the surgical theater. Is that what you're saying?
No, but I do think that there should be enforcement of this.
Okay.
Without that, this bill's not worth anything.
Okay. Good enough.
Senator Taylor?
Yes, I'm sorry. Can you provide that, your survey results and or is it on your website or somewhere?
I'd have to check with the organization. I do the legal side of this, not the survey side of this.
Okay, but you said it's public record.
Their endorsements would absolutely be. They would.
Oh, I thought
provide.
this, okay, so in order to get, in order to get endorsed by you, you have to sign on to the pro-life pledge or something.
Again, that's not my part of the organization. However, I would say that Indiana Right to Life is not going to endorse somebody who doesn't support their mission and their values. So it would seem logical that a person would have to support their mission and their values in order to be endorsed by them.
Okay, so you will provide the endorsement list, and then you don't provide your survey questions.
I will follow up with the organization and be happy to get them in touch with you to figure out what they can get you.
Okay, can you do that as soon as possible?
Absolutely.
We're only going to be here for, well, I don't know. We're only going to be here for a short period of time on this.
Yes, I'd be happy to have them follow up with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And Senator Bray, I also have my written testimony. How would you like me to?
Provide that to Mr. Hooton over here. He can get that to us.
Wonderful. I'll walk around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for the opportunity.
Next witness, Carrie Bennett. After that will be Isabella Zollner, and then Cassie Bear. After Cassie Bear will be Barry Atwell. Ms. Bennett, please go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Carrie Hyatt Bennett. I am the Chief Legal Counsel at the Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence. I'm an attorney and have been working to provide legal services to domestic violence survivors for almost 30 years. We oppose this bill simply because getting pregnant is not always a choice, but staying pregnant should be. The Indiana Coalition Against Domestic Violence cares about this issue because reproductive coercion is a form of intimate partner abuse. It's a form of intimate partner abuse recognized by the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. We know that homicide is the leading cause of maternal death in the United States, and we know 45% of those homicides involve intimate partner violence. We also know 33% of women seeking abortions are already victims of intimate partner violence. Therefore, access to an abortion is a life-saving measure for survivors of intimate partner violence. We know that in this state, where domestic violence homicides are up a staggering 181% in 18 months, and maternal and infant mortality are among the worst in this country already, this state wants to take that life-saving choice away from survivors. I've been rushing around trying to find former clients who will testify, who I know lost their reproductive choice long before Roe versus Wade was overturned, who had their birth control sabotaged or maybe substituted, or they lived in a birth control desert, or maybe they were kept consistently pregnant, because that is the ultimate form of control. It brings your education to an end, your goals to an end, your aspirations to an end. I selfishly wanted them to expose themselves to the shame and the humiliation and the frustration and the additional trauma of reliving their nightmares to you, in the hopes that you don't take whatever shred of control away from them that they still have. Forcing a survivor to go through a pregnancy and a birth that they cannot handle, whether mentally, physically, financially, or emotionally, is not under anyone's definition of pro-life. Removing the autonomy, the agency, the freedom, that's an important word, and yes, the reproductive choice away from Hoosier survivors, only to be told that, hey, we're protecting life, we just don't give a damn about yours. Survivors in Indiana will not forget this betrayal. Women in Indiana will not forget this betrayal. They will not forget that the people they voted for did not listen to them and did not choose to support them. Thank you for your time on behalf of all domestic violence survivors in this state.
Thank you very much. Senator Yoder.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And real quick, you probably stated this, but can you let us know in Indiana, what are the numbers? What are rates of victims of domestic violence in the state of Indiana? What are we looking at?
Well, as I mentioned before, domestic violence homicides, and that's not incidents, homicides are up 181% in the last 18 months. Okay? I have, in my 30 years of practice, seen so many more victims of reproductive coercion in addition to the physical abuse. So our numbers are continuing to grow post-pandemic, where we thought that would go down, but they're actually continuing to go up, or at least they're stagnating at a very high rate. I run a legal services program for survivors, and our case referrals are up 172%. It's just amazing. And that's going to get worse before it gets better, because we work with so many survivors in rural areas that are isolated, or birth control's not an option, or it's shamed, or it's not acceptable, or they literally cannot access birth control. And then when you're kept pregnant over and over and over again, that is the ultimate form of control, because then you can never leave.
Well, thank you for the service that you do provide Hoosiers and for the work that you do.
Thank you.
For Indiana.
Are there further questions? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your being here. Next, Isabella Zollner, and then Cassie Baer, Barry Atwell, and then Kristen Cohn. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Isabella Zollner, and I am 17 years old. I'm here as the Youth Ambassador of Pride Lafayette, our great state's oldest community center. Now, I know that no matter what testimony I give today, it isn't going to change the minds of those of you who are determined to strip my human rights away. No matter what terrifying accounts I bring to the table, no matter what statistics I read to you, nothing is going to change your minds, because to some of you, I am just a girl who doesn't deserve a say in what happens to her today or after. So I am not here to give testimony to you. I am here to speak to all of the people that are being disenfranchised and silenced today. We are not alone. We are not helpless. We are not weak. We will not go back. I am standing here giving testimony with every one of the thousands of people who rallied outside yesterday, and every one of the millions of Hoosiers who oppose Senate Bill 1 and who are fighting to maintain control of their bodies. So I am not a girl giving a speech that will not sway the minds of men who think they can control my body. I am a woman standing with millions of women, and we are more powerful than any ban you can throw at us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Senator Taylor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, young lady. Here's some advice I want to give you about what you said. First of all, I feel like I want to commend, did you go to school? Do you go to school here in Indiana?
I'm going to be a senior at William Henry Harrison High School in West Lafayette.
Okay, so let me say this. Kudos to them, because they produce something that I believe is something we should be proud of, and that is young people speaking up for their rights before it's time for you to actually vote for us, okay? That testimony you just gave does matter, all right? You may not believe it. You may believe what the television tells you, that people don't, legislators won't hear your voice. But let me speak for what I consider to be a supermajority of this chamber. We hear what you're saying. Yes, there are people that will influence votes in this body for years and decades to come, because it was done before and it's going to be done in the future. But don't ever, ever believe that what we hear from you could not change our mind. I learned that early on in my career here, and you could have changed somebody's mind today, even with your speech, but good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
She had
Oh, sorry, I didn't see over there.
It's okay, Senator Messmer. I wanted to just reiterate what I've said to others. Thank you so much for being here. And I thought that it would be important to mention there was such a turnout yesterday, and I know I've received texts and emails and phone calls from people who couldn't return today and share their testimony. I'm glad you were able to, and you are a woman. We are hearing you roar. Keep roaring, and encourage all of your classmates and peers to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now any other questions? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, Cassie Bear.
Hello, my name is Casey Bear. I am here on behalf of those in support of reproductive health. I oppose Senate Bill 1 prohibiting abortion. Abortion is a basic health care need for millions of women. Regardless of whether abortion is legal or not, people are still going to require and regularly access abortion services. When undertaken by a trained healthcare provider in sanitary conditions, abortions are one of the safest medical procedures available, even safer than childbirth. When governments restrict access to abortions, people are compelled to resort to clandestine, unsafe abortions. Criminalizing abortions does not stop abortions, it just makes abortions less safe. Unsafe abortions are the third leading cause of maternal deaths worldwide, and Indiana's maternal mortality rate is the third highest in this country, the third highest. I got pregnant with my daughter shortly after graduating high school. I spent my first semester in college alone and pregnant in a strange city without a support system in place. I moved back in with my mother, who is not supportive of me being a young, soon-to-be single teenage mom. My support system was essentially non-existent. I had no community, no role models, no advocates, little assistance, and I felt alone. I was a statistic, and I felt it every day. I graduated high school in 2004 and finally obtained my bachelor's degree in 2012. 8 years of trying to find childcare, saving up enough money to be able to take a semester here and a semester there. I did a lot of growing up in those 8 years, wondering if I was going to be enough for my daughter. Would she follow in my footsteps? The darkest part of those 8 years was the day I found out I was pregnant again. The joy I experienced with my first pregnancy was a stark difference to the emotions I felt when I found out I was pregnant for a second time. I was full of fear, anxiety, anger, resentments, hopelessness. That's when I decided to have an abortion. It was the most difficult decision I have had to make thus far in my life. It's a decision I still think of often and wonder about, although there's not been one day of my life that I regret the decision I was able to make for myself and my family. After my abortion, I was able to finish up my bachelor's degree in psychology. I graduated with honors 8 years after starting my long journey. As soon as I graduated, I enrolled in a graduate program to become a physical therapist. In 2016, I became Dr. Casey Leslie, physical therapist. I overcame the statistics. I accomplished a big hurdle, and the only reason I am here today with a couple of letters behind my name was because I had a choice. The right to reproductive choice is critical to women's rights. It's critical to the concepts of equality and self-government. Democratic government begins with the right to govern our individual lives. On behalf of the citizens of Indiana, I want to thank the groups who have tirelessly and diligently been working to advocate for the health rights of women and our future generations. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Casey. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Barry Atwell, and next on deck is Kristen Cohn.
Thank you. There's been a lot said over the last yesterday's session and so far today, and I'll try not to repeat a bunch of it because I know there's a lot more to be said. Let's start off with a basic definition of murder. Murder is when you intentionally kill an innocent human on purpose, intentionally, and the human being inside the womb is innocent. I don't think there's any question about that. Indiana law recognizes what science textbooks teach us under 16-34-2-1.1e says human physical life begins when a human ovum is fertilized by a human sperm. That's a quote directly from Indiana law. What we're talking about is murder. Abortion is murder. When you intentionally rip the arms and legs off of a baby
30
and
seconds.
let it bleed to death, that's murder.
Oh, 2 minutes.
There was a
30
group
seconds.
of people out here yesterday chanting, vote them out, vote them out. And the fact is that most of those people didn't vote you in. The people who have voted you in are the people who want to stand for life and want you to stand for life, and you've committed to standing for life, but you've not done it. You've put Roe v. Wade as your excuse for not standing for life, not standing up to the Supreme Court. That excuse is gone. Do what's right. It's always right to do right, and it's always wrong to do wrong, to quote my good friend John Jacob. Do right. Replace the language of this bill with the language from John Jacob and Kurt Knisely's bill, protection at conception, or protection of life, as it's been changed the name of it, and protect life. That's what we expect of you, and that's what your voters expect of you. Any questions?
Are there questions from the committee? Thank you, sir. Kristen Cohn. After that, we have Cecilia Pointer and Beryl Cohen. So Kristen Cohn now, Cecilia Pointer, Beryl Cohen.
Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Cohn. I'm the owner of Silver in the City. I've been an Indiana resident for the majority of my adult life. I have the privilege of being a Purdue alumni, a mother by choice, and a business owner, an Indiana business owner for over 22 years. Women are a vital part of every economy, including Indiana's economy. In Indiana, we make up 47% of the workforce and 42% of business owners. When women have the opportunity to seek gainful employment and provide for themselves and their families, they are empowered members of our community and contributors to a healthy economy. In a report by the Joint Economic Committee Democrats, it was found that access to abortion increases a woman's probability of graduating college by 72%. Delaying motherhood by a year increases a woman's wages by 11% on average. Access to abortion increased women's workforce participation by 2%. It expanded career opportunities, including attaining a professional role, by almost 40 points. Legalization of abortion decreased the percentage of children who grew up in poverty by 0.54% and improved their future life outcomes, including increased college attendance. Being denied an abortion increases the amount of debt 30 days or more past due by 78%, leading to increased negative public records such as bankruptcies and evictions by 81%. When we take away an individual's right to make the reproductive choices, including safe and legal abortion, that are in the best interest of their health, family, education, and employment, we are stripping them of economic security and opportunity, and we're hobbling our economy as a result. In less than 4 weeks, the ACLU has gathered signatures from over 500 Indiana employers from more than 30 towns and cities across the state to the business letter in support of reproductive freedom. Businesses boldly standing up against policies that hinder people's health, independence, and ability to fully succeed in the workplace. And that list is growing every day. Our state is full of vibrant individuals who contribute to our economy and deserve the right to bodily autonomy. If we want to continue attracting businesses and talented employees to our state, a ban on abortion is unacceptable legislation. I appeal to you to make decisions and pass laws based on what's in the best interest of Hoosier women. You'll earn their respect, their support, and their appreciation for protecting their choice. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony and the voices of over 500 Indiana businesses today.
Thank you for being here today. Are there questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Yes, Senator Yoder.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. So to clarify, you're saying that these employers, these businesses who signed on to this letter asking to protect reproductive access and health care, you're stating that putting in the abortion ban, which is what this Senate Bill 1 is not good for Indiana. And here are 500 business leaders who stand with you. Is that what you are saying?
That is what I'm saying.
Thank you.
Are there further questions from the committee? Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your time here.
Thank you.
Cecilia Pointer. After that, Beryl Cohn and John Purnell.
Hi, I've been a Hoosier my whole life, and I have social anxiety, so this is like really difficult for me, so that's how important this is to me. I, like a majority of Hoosiers, believe that the decision to terminate a pregnancy should be up to a woman and her medical provider. There are various reasons to terminate a pregnancy, and each are private and personal. The reason for my abortion was medical. My second pregnancy would have killed me if it was not terminated. It was an emergency situation, and I didn't have time for the doctor to find a hospital lawyer and decide if my life was more important than the risk of being arrested. Because abortions were legal, safe, and accessible when I needed one, there was no hesitation, second-guessing, or debate. Because of that abortion, my then 7-year-old child still had her mother, my husband still had his wife, and I was able to have another baby a few years later. Now, I know that this is why all abortions should be legal, safe, and accessible. Now, I know that some will say, oh, there's an exemption for life of the mother. This is not only disingenuous, but it ignores how it will not work in the real world. Just ask the mother in Texas that had to carry a dead fetus for 2 weeks. When a mother and her doctor cannot make the necessary immediate decision to save a woman's life, she will die. And a ban on abortion will result in many abortion providers moving out of the state, and any remaining providers will be dissuaded from providing this medical care. Women will die. Pregnancy is a dangerous medical condition and is evidenced by the fact that the U.S. has the highest maternal mortality rate of any developed country. Pregnancy takes an enormous toll on the body, and every person needs to be able to decide for themselves whether they want to proceed with these risks and morbidities. Both of my daughters are adults now and could provide me with grandchildren, which I really was looking forward to, but not now. Instead, I have had a talk with them and suggested that their husbands get a vasectomy, and I will pay for it if they cannot afford one, even though I cannot afford that. I prefer that they not risk their lives by getting pregnant, since their right to life and liberty is under attack, and there's no guarantee that their lives will be saved in the event that they experience one of the many things that could go wrong. If they choose to go through with a pregnancy, I will support them, because that is their choice. My daughters are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens, and their rights should not be infringed. There should be no need for exceptions, because all abortions should be legal, safe, and accessible. Outlawing abortions will not stop abortions. It will only stop safe abortions. And as for religion, nowhere in the Constitution is God or the divine explicitly mentioned. And why are other religious views more important than my spiritual view, which is reincarnation? And in my spiritual belief, the spirit does not enter the vessel until the moment of birth. Therefore, the fetus does not become human till birth. Everyone's entitled to their own religious views, but you're not entitled to impose them on me.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Other questions from the committee? Appreciate you being here today. Thank you. Beryl Cohen. After that, John Purnell, then Amy Bremen. Beryl Cohen, John Purnell, Amy Bremen. Go ahead, please. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for letting me speak today. My name is Beryl Cohen, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers Indiana chapter. We are one of 55 chapters that make up the whole National Association of Social Workers. We are the largest membership association of professional social workers in the world. Social work training and practice is based on 7 core values and ethical principles that are embedded in our Code of Ethics. The language in Senate Bill 1 runs counter to our core values and ethics, and let me give you some examples. With social justice, our core value and ethical principle of social justice calls on social workers to challenge social injustice and strive to ensure access to needed information, services, resources, and meaningful participation in decision-making for all people. Dignity and worth of the person calls on social workers to promote a client's right to self-determination, and the importance of human relationships, which encourages us to engage people as partners in the helping process. Senate Bill 1 also runs counter to a number of sections in the NASW Code of Ethics. We have an ethical responsibility to clients and their right to self-determination, to respect and promote the rights of clients to self-determination and assist them in their efforts to identify and clarify their goals. We also have one around cultural competence, which asks social workers to demonstrate an understanding of culture and its function in human behavior and society, and recognize the strengths that exist in all cultures. We also have a responsibility around social and political action to expand choice and opportunity for all people. We're called on to promote conditions that encourage and show respect for cultural and social diversity. Finally, our Social Work Speaks 12th edition calls on social workers to support efforts to objectively educate individuals on the range of options available to them when facing an unplanned pregnancy, including abortion and adoption services based on evidence and, again, the beliefs of the client. The language in SB1 limits users' right to self-determination. It limits their choice and the opportunity to fully participate in their own decision-making. It also ignores the cultural diversity and beliefs of Hoosiers. We respectfully ask you to support every Hoosier's right to self-determination and the opportunity to make their own decision by voting no on SB1.
Thank you very much. Other questions from the committee? Mr. Cohen, thank you for being here. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Yoder, I did not see you. I looked over there and didn't see it.
I have a real quick question about this issue of reporting or not reporting when it comes to the exception of rape and incest. As a representative for social workers, what does it look like if that would be put in place? If, right now there isn't a reporting requirement and the individual has to sign an affidavit. Speak to that, and then speak to what if that individual will then be required to report in order to access care?
I think requiring reporting is an extra step that shouldn't be there. I mean, I think that I think it should be accessible to anybody who needs it no matter what. And that is where we stand. And whatever's in the best interest of the client and that person that we're talking to, we do have some concerns about if language was added in at some point that would limit or require social workers to report things. That would then get into our bounds. But as far as our conversations with our clients, those are confidential.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is John Purnell, then Amy Bremen. And just a moment, Mr. Purnell, before you start. Then Victoria Garcia Wilburn and Shruti Rana. Victoria Garcia Wilburn and Shruti Rana. Mr. Purnell, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Messmer and the committee members for letting me testify today. My name is John Purnell, and almost 20 years ago, I stood by and did nothing to stop my ex-wife from having an abortion. At the time, it seemed like it was the best option for our situation, and it's not like my opinion mattered anyway, right? It's her decision, her consequences. At least that is how I viewed abortion at the time, but I realized I was so wrong. The guilt and the shame that started that day and continued to haunt me for 18 years. Our marriage was already in trouble, and the decision to abort our baby was the deciding factor to remain separated and finally get a divorce. Aborting our baby and losing my marriage added fuel to a fire that was already burning inside of me. The shame, the guilt, and the remorse were expressed through anger towards others and myself. I feel like a common misconception is that abortion has no impact on the father. We are told that it is her body and her choice, and although I felt that way initially, I soon realized that I had been misinformed. If someone would have been there to tell me the emotional effect a man would experience, I think it would have impacted my choice to idly watch while our baby was aborted. I honestly believe that it's equally important to inform and educate both women and men that abortion is the act of killing your baby and will cause lifelong emotional effects on both parents. I thought that abortion was the solution to my problem, when in reality, it only compounded my original issues. The guilt from not standing up for my baby followed me for almost 2 decades. I was already into using drugs, and the loss of my baby and marriage added to the reasons that I was using. I hid the feelings and painful emotions behind any substances I could get my hands on. I blamed myself for not fighting to keep our baby and fix our marriage. I never spoke to anyone about this abortion. I kept it deep inside of me, buried in a fog of anger and drug use. I did not know where I could go or who I could talk to about it, because the process and even just the word abortion felt like it had to be kept secret, almost as if it was a dirty word. The decision affected Angel in a negative way as well. The feelings of guilt and shame that she felt through the years also fed an addiction of hers for 17 years. She never could find peace, so she buried her emotions with drugs as well. And although in different places living separate lives, this one decision helped destroy 2 people. We both fought an uphill battle to bury and forget aborting our baby. I feel that if there would have been more information readily available and people willing to walk us through the true process and emotions that we would face, it would have influenced the decision to abort our baby. I just recently found healing offered by the ministry. He found his grace. And I never knew anything about forgiveness or healing or not giving my unborn baby a voice and standing up for what was right 18 years ago until I allowed God into my life. Acknowledging and talking about my abortion experience has allowed Jesus Christ to issue me forgiveness and freedom that I've never been able to find anywhere else for all of these years. The memory will never go away, but the self-condemnation was taken away when Christ made me a new creation in him. Angel was not as fortunate as I am. She lost her fight with her addiction and passed away December 2nd, 2020, of a drug overdose. And in the end, the cost of aborting our baby was years and years of heartache and losing 2 lives instead of 1. Thank you for allowing me to share my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Purnell, thanks for coming here and sharing your testimony. Are there any questions from the committee? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Amy Bremen.
Good morning. My name is Amy Bremen. I hold a PhD in medical genetics, and I'm currently a clinical laboratory director in the IU genetic testing labs. I'm here on behalf of myself and my patients to voice my opposition to Senate Bill 1. My job is to provide genetic testing health care for individuals in need of a diagnosis, and this includes all pregnant women who desire prenatal genetic testing. I understand that the bill, as it is currently written, has no time constraints around abortion in cases where fetal anomalies are considered, quote, incompatible with sustained life outside the womb, end quote. But I have also heard the testimony from others asking that this be more restrictive. It is important for you to understand that in most cases, the need for prenatal genetic testing is not known until after the 18th week of pregnancy, when detailed ultrasound is able to identify fetal anomalies that could indicate a severe genetic disorder. Our laboratory works hard to provide rapid results to pregnant patients to allow them to make informed decisions on their pregnancy. But even with the current law, this can be challenging. I strongly recommend that the current gestational age at which ending a pregnancy is legal in Indiana for fetal anomalies stay at 20 weeks. That is why I'm here today, to let you know that further abortion restrictions, and specifically an earlier gestational age cutoff, will absolutely mean that lethal genetic conditions will not be diagnosed in time to allow parents to make informed choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for the committee? Senator Taylor?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Bremen, for being here. I want to talk about this genetic testing you're talking about here. So you work in a laboratory.
Correct.
Where women who are pregnant get this test, right?
Correct.
And the test is done why? Why would you get a referral from a doctor to do this test?
There are many reasons. Some include previous family history, but oftentimes the testing is done because at the 18 to 20 week anatomy scan, which is that detailed ultrasound that's done once the fetus has developed enough to be able to see the organs and anatomy in detail, something is seen that is concerning for a genetic condition.
Okay.
And since that can't occur until around 18 weeks or beyond, that is often the first sign that there is a suspected genetic disorder that needs to be tested for.
Okay. So now there are some people who would say that, so these fetal anomalies that we keep throwing this word around, would, when you detect them, then you tell the mother, hey, this is what we see. And based on our medical judgment, this is the likely outcome, right? That's
Correct.
what you do.
We can only state what's known about the condition. And in some cases, if enough is known about the condition, which isn't always the case, some conditions are private genetic anomalies in that family that have never been observed before. When there is information known, we share what we know in the results of that testing about the prognosis for the child.
And so you give them a prognosis, and then they have to make a decision at that point whether or not this could cause a problem or something that they want to do. So you may not be familiar with this, but, let me ask you a question. So could some of it be, hey, your child is developing and we don't see an arm or I don't know, an eye or something, you know. So we have currently in law that you cannot abort that child because of a fetal abnormality, which is different than a fetal anomaly. Am I correct?
So there are some distinctions to be made. What can be seen on the ultrasound could be called an anomaly, but in some cases, the indication for the genetic testing is nothing more than growth delay. The fetus isn't growing appropriately. The amniotic fluid level isn't appropriate. Something's slightly wrong that could be suggestive of a more complex issue. So what's seen on the ultrasound is not always as severe as what the genetic diagnosis may indicate.
Okay. Is there any other step after the genetic diagnosis? Or is that the last diagnosis that's done before you
Well, this is where my role is complete. We provide the diagnosis, and then that information is typically communicated to the patient through a genetic counselor who counsels them on the report that we've issued, the prognosis, the options that are available to them at that time.
Okay. And all of this happens under current law. The higher likelihood is 18 to 22 weeks.
So that's when some of these anomalies are able to be detected that prompt the genetic testing, which again, depending on the testing being done, can take 2 weeks or longer to provide a result, which means we're already under time constraints to get this information back to the mother in time for her to make an informed choice.
Now, there are some suggestions that we limit the abortion to 12 weeks. In your experience, professional experience, have you seen situations where you've done a genetic test at 12 weeks and then another one at, say, 20 weeks, and it's totally different?
The genetic testing results shouldn't change. The issue is that at 12 weeks, that's the earliest that a sample can even be collected for diagnostic testing. Okay. And with the additional weeks of processing that testing and issuing results, that would be at least 14 weeks.
Okay, you said something. That's the 12 weeks is the first time that there could be the genetic testing?
Correct. There are screening tests that can be done earlier, but diagnostic genetic testing requires either a biopsy of the placenta, a chorionic villus sampling, which can be done as early as about 11 weeks, or an amniocentesis, which is more common because those tests are performed once there's an anomaly observed. So that's after 16 weeks. So in some very small percentage of cases, we can get a sample to do genetic testing prenatally as early as 11 weeks. But at that time, that's usually when there's a known family history and the mother had reason to suspect that there was a genetic disorder. In most cases, there is no reason to suspect the genetic disorder until after that detailed ultrasound at 18 to 20 weeks. So it's the rare case that we are able to even receive a sample for testing at the very earliest point, which is about 11 weeks. And we would not be able to issue a result by 12 weeks.
All right, so I'm gonna leave you with this. So, young lady is pregnant, she goes to her doctor, they do an ultrasound, and she's 8 weeks pregnant. According to the doctors, they don't even do an ultrasound at that point, do they?
They don't do detailed ultrasounds at that point, and even if they attempted a detailed ultrasound, many of the organ systems haven't developed, so it wouldn't be visible.
So before they even get to you, it would be at least 18 weeks before they get that detailed ultrasound, before they could say that there's some kind of genetic testing that needs to be done.
Correct, in most cases.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, quick question. So the bill now doesn't have any time limit on what you term as fetal fatal anomaly. We don't quite use that phrase here, but essentially if the unborn child has no sustainable life outside of the womb, there's not a time limit on that. Is that, in your mind, at least, is that a positive thing for the bill?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, my concern is that there would be a time limit, and I'm urging that that not be the case.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from the committee? Okay, Senator Taylor.
Just one question, I promise you. Because it follows up with are all the genetic tests that you do based on the fact that the child will not live outside the womb?
No, sir.
So what are the other tests?
So the tests are looking for hundreds of different possible abnormalities. Some of them could be neurological abnormalities, some could be physical abnormalities, some could be incompatible with life. Not all of the abnormal results that we diagnose are incompatible with life.
So they could live, they just may not have a brain. Well, not a brain, excuse me. They may not have a fully developed brain, a cranium, or some other organ, but they could live outside the womb.
It depends widely on the diagnosis, but there definitely are genetic conditions that are compatible with life that we can diagnose.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just some housekeeping quickly. The next two witnesses are Victoria Garcia Wilburn and then Shruti Rana. And given the time, we'll probably shift from that point to discuss as a committee some amendments and things. So that will probably be the end of the testimony. Ma'am, come on forward.
Thank you for your time today, Senators. My name is Victoria Garcia Wilburn. I'm a university professor, researcher, healthcare provider, and mother. At about 27 weeks, I started hemorrhaging. I was starting to soak through my clothes at work and quickly called my husband, who at the time was serving our city as a police officer, and he came, lights and sirens, to rush me to our local hospital where I had many friends working. I've been a healthcare provider for almost 20 years, and I am the exception. Because of my involvement in healthcare community, they knew my name, they knew my previous birthing history, they paid attention to me, they listened to me and my choices. And as they tried to get my hemorrhaging under control to find the root cause, I had a team of providers to tell me what would happen if I delivered at this time, and it was not good. It would not be a good outcome for my son had he been born early. And if I may remind you all, Indiana has the 9th highest infant mortality rate in all 50 states. I was put on bed rest, had access to life-saving health insurance, could afford a drug that would allow me to carry to term, and he extended my son's life in the womb and mine. However, this is not I am the exception, not the norm here in Indiana. In Indiana, we only have one critical care OB unit in the entire state. What about all the women who don't have access to health insurance given the poverty across our state? What about the countless Black and brown women whose lives are lost during childbirth at disproportionate rates? We have the 3rd highest maternal mortality rate in all of the country. That's how much we care about life here in Indiana. That's how much we care about life for women who are choosing to be mothers, who want to be mothers, who are already mothers to their children. They are losing their lives. We care about life so much in Indiana that 1/3 of our counties don't even have access to OBGYNs. That's how much we care about life. Because this state's supermajority chose to continually build its budget surplus at the expense of citizens' basic needs. Not only will this proposed legislation not reduce the number of unplanned pregnancies, as it has not addressed one of the root causes of this issues, but consequently, it will increase already detrimental maternal mortality rates in high-risk pregnancies and further discourage the learning of life-saving expertise, create further economic disparities between our counties, cause talent to leave the state, deter new businesses from choosing Indiana, and make the state even harder to serve, let alone govern. Addressing women's reproductive health care requires thoughtful, strategic, methodical attention with expertise from women, physicians, and healthcare experts across our state, not religious groups with national agendas leading the conversation. This emergency session was meant to capitalize on a national narrative that completely ignores the desires of 84% of your constituents. Your proposed legislation, Senate Bill 1, falls short of sound science and fails to meet the needs of Hoosiers, and we implore you to do better and acknowledge the bodily autonomy of women.
Thank you, ma'am. Other questions from the committee? Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Shruti Rana.
Committee members, my name is Shruti Rana. I'm a mother, lawyer, and professor, and a founding member and past co-chair of the National Asian Pacific American Women's Forum. NAPAF Indiana is a nonpartisan organization focused on advocating for and lifting up the voices of Asian American, and Pacific Islander women in Indiana. In 2020, we conducted what we believe to be the first Get Out the Vote canvassing effort centering AAPI women in Indiana, reaching thousands of Hoosiers. In 2021, we fought the rising tide of anti-Asian hate in Indiana during the pandemic, hate which was amplified by elected state officials, including our Indiana Attorney General. And we stood with our Sikh sisters and brothers in the wake of the horrific FedEx murders. Now, in 2022, we are here in the Indiana State House to defend equality as Indiana becomes the first state in the nation to try and strip women of equal citizenship they're entitled to under the law in a special session post-Dobbs. These are only the most recent examples of the ways that AAPI women in Indiana have been neglected, stereotyped, targeted, and even killed. There's a long history of targeting AAPI women by the state of Indiana for reproductive coercion. Even years before Dobbs, the state prosecuted 2 AAPI women for pregnancy losses and coupled these attempts to criminalize pregnancy with racist stereotyping, xenophobia, and the rejection of evidence and science. But that's not all. In 2016, Indiana passed a so-called sex selection abortion ban, part of a nationwide effort to harness xenophobia and hate and direct it towards pregnant people's access to abortion. The Indiana bill, like the others in the nation it was modeled after, attempted to co-opt the language of civil rights to promote abortion bans. It originated in groups that travel the nation, claiming that they are fighting eugenics and discrimination, but they are doing exactly the opposite, making discrimination and eugenics more likely. Why is that? Roe and related cases protected reproductive liberty and decision-making autonomy. That means they protected both the right to choose, but also the right to not be forced to have an abortion or endure forced sterilization. These protections are particularly meaningful in Indiana, which was the first state in the nation to pass a forced sterilization law in 1907. Indiana allowed the most recent ban to become law just days ago. This law, just like SB1 we're talking about today, attempts to gaslight Hoosiers about the true nature of the cruelty and provisions within. Lawmakers who actually want to support equality and civil rights would not be trafficking in ugly, discredited stereotypes or attempting to divide Americans. But that is exactly what is happening in Indiana. I've been present in our Senate chambers yesterday and today, and you can see the impacts of stereotyping, hate, and discrimination play out in real time here today. The eyes of the world are focused on Indiana after our state leaders flouted both human decency and the rule of law in their rush to harass a 10-year-old patient and the doctor who cared for her. What everyone is seeing here today is people making statements of unfathomable cruelty, trying to outdo each other in the ways that they claim SB1 is not extreme enough, describing the ways that they want to torture living, breathing women and demeaning them with every breath. We see you, we see who you really are, and so does our nation and the world. I urge you to reject this ban. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rana. Are there questions? Thank you for being here. Okay, as I indicated, the chair is going to now close the testimony. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. The chair has to close the testimony, and the reason for that is because the reason for that, ma'am, please have a seat. Ma'am, no, ma'am, have a seat. I don't want to ask you to leave the chamber, but I need you to have a seat. We're going to close the conversation with regard to testimony now. Bill, will you help?
Permanently changes the trajectory of our lives. I am just asking.
We need to close the testimony now for the reason that we need to work on amendments. The committee needs to work on amendments, and we need to turn around. There's a committee hearing. Ma'am, I'm sorry. We need the committee to turn around, do its work, because we have another committee here this afternoon that has to occupy this same chamber. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, I want to thank everybody who came and took the trouble to testify both yesterday and today. In addition, I want to thank the folks and apologize to those who did not get an opportunity to testify. We literally had hundreds of people here to come and testify, and there just simply isn't enough time to get that done. My hope is that we had a cross-section of lots of folks, both for and against these issues, that had an opportunity to be heard, and I think the committee got a great benefit of that. Having said that, now we have a number of amendments that have been filed by committee members. I'm going to ask the counsel for the committee, Andy Hedges, to talk about, just give a quick summary of the number and the subject matter of those amendments, please. Yes, please.
Okay, Amendment number 1 requires a hospital that has a maternity ward to offer a woman in that ward the opportunity to receive a subdural, long-acting contraceptive. This was Senate Bill 364 from last session. Amendment number 2 does two things. First, it provides that an unlawful abortion, the type that was not criminalized, will be a level 5 felony. And second, it sets up a timeline for the rape or incest exception. If the woman is under 16 years of age, there's a 12-week time period. If she is at least 16 years of age, there is an 8-week time period.
And with regard to that one, the criminal level 5 felony essentially takes it, maybe not exactly, but essentially back to where it is today?
Yes.
Where the current law is today?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, thank you.
Amendment number 4 would add a new section that would specify that no law could be construed to restrict the prescribing, et cetera, of birth control and contraceptives, including emergency contraceptives. Amendment number 5 removes the prohibition on using telehealth for abortions. Amendment number 6 is a little more complicated. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act gives a person certain rights if what we call a government entity statute burdens their religious, their free exercise of religion. And this provides that if a person's system of religious belief holds that human life does not begin until a particular stage of fetal development, any governmental entity statute that prohibits an abortion before this stage of human development substantially burdens the person's exercise of religion, which would allow them to have certain remedies under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Amendment number 7 asks LSA in the upcoming session to prepare legislation to give the obligations or benefits owed to children would also apply to a fetus at any stage of development. Amendment number 8, there's a definition, there's a defense to certain crimes that would constitute abortion, that could be charged for an abortion, with the exception of feticide and performing a lawful abortion. Those can still be prosecuted. This would remove feticide from the defense, from the exception to the defense, so that the defense would apply to feticide. So the only thing the person could be charged with would be the performing the unlawful abortion. In the bill, abortion clinics are only allowed to use chemical abortions, and this would reinstate current status where they can provide surgical abortions. Amendment number 12 provides that the definition of rape or incest would also include sexual intercourse with a minor who is under the age of consent, meaning under the age of 16. Number 14, this repeals a provision that allows the medical licensing board to revoke the license of a physician for failure to transmit a form or for the performance of an abortion. There are some other provisions in law that would still allow the usual disciplinary process to go forward. Amendment number 15, this establishes a pregnancy termination review panel, which is kind of like the medical review panel that you have in medical malpractice actions, where you have a board of physicians who will make a determination on the complaint before it is filed in court. This would require the Attorney General, before filing an action to revoke a physician's license for performing an unlawful abortion, to present this evidence to a board of physicians. If the board of physicians found that there likely was evidence that the physician committed the violation, the Attorney General would be allowed to prosecute the case before the medical licensing board. If the board found that there was not sufficient evidence, then the Attorney General would not be able to bring that case before the medical licensing board. Amendment number 16 adds to the language in the bill concerning an abortion being necessary to prevent a substantial permanent impairment of the life of the pregnant woman. It also adds, or if continuing the pregnancy would pose a non-trivial threat to the health of the pregnant woman. And then it goes to specify that the non-trivial threat language would only apply for abortions performed before viability. Amendment number 17, there are some reporting requirements that apply to abortion today. They're not in the bill, they're in the statute. This would specify that the termination of a pregnancy of a fetus that is incapable of sustained life outside the womb, which is excluded from the definition of abortion, but those procedures would also need to be reported in the same manner that abortions are reported. Number 20, this specifies that that if the statute requiring consent of a parent or legal guardian doesn't apply to a minor who, if the minor is pregnant due to the rape by a parent, legal guardian, or custodian. And so all the woman has to do in that case is submit an affidavit. Number 21, this provides that abortion is unlawful unless a physician determines that the abortion is necessary to prevent a substantial permanent impairment to the life or physical health of a pregnant woman. So this adds the physical health to the impairment of the life language. And it has the, but it also specifies that the abortion can only be performed after viability if this applies. Number 23, this adds a definition of reproductive coercion and adds reproductive coercion as another sort of exception under which an abortion would be lawful. And number 24 deals with the affidavit. It specifies that the affidavit needs to be signed by the woman and requires the affidavit to be placed in the woman's permanent health record. So those are the amendments.
Okay, thank you. All right, move through here and move through some of these amendments, and I'll call amendment number 2 first. Will you give that a quick summary again?
Amendment number 2 is the amendment that provides that all of the abortions in Section 1 are level 5 felony, and establishes the rape or incest timelines. If the pregnant woman is less than 16 years of age, the post-fertilization age of the fetus must be less than 12 weeks. If the woman is at least 16 years of age, the post-fertilization age of the fetus must be less than 8 weeks.
Is there discussion on that amendment? Is there a motion for the amendment? Is there a second? Senator Lannon?
You asked for discussion on the amendment.
Go ahead.
I had my hand up. So currently in the bill, as it's written right now, there are crimes, but not for performing an abortion per se. Is that correct?
There are a number of crimes in the bill, in the statute as it exists today. For example, for partial birth abortions or for dismemberment. Thank you, but not for the others. This actually, this would bring it back to the way the current statute is with regard to performing an unlawful abortion.
So this would the individual who would be at risk here or subject to the penalties or the crime would be the person who performs the abortion, which I presume in most cases would be a physician?
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yeah. And currently in the bill, I thought there were some immunity provisions for physicians or those performing abortions. How does that relate to that aspect of it?
I think you might be, there's an immunity that's unchanged in the feticide statute, but not in the performing an unlawful abortion statute.
All right. And then I guess the comment I have in regards to when a woman who is raped, the time frames here, currently in the bill, there is, what are the time frames? Because I presume
there are no time frames in the bill right now.
So now we're saying that the woman, if she's over 16, has to have the abortion post-fertilization 8 weeks. Is that right?
That's correct.
Well, it seems to me that a lot of women, I mean, is that really enough time for a woman to know if they're pregnant and to make this decision, whether or not to have this abortion? Seems like that's a rush. And likewise, certainly with a child under the age of 16, we're saying 12 weeks. I mean, it just seems like that's, if you're wanting to basically say you can't get an abortion if you're raped, this is probably the way to do it, it seems to me, or to really limit it, if that's the intent of this amendment. So I cannot support this amendment under any circumstances.
Senator Taylor.
I don't know who to ask the question to because I don't know if anybody's claimed authorship of this amendment. But so why 8 weeks? Somebody had to come up with a number.
Senator Glick.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, there was a concern of the vagueness on some of these requirements. So the open-endedness of the rape and incest part of this, people who find that they are pregnant from a criminal act, rape or incest, they should be, have the option of getting in the bill. We allow them the exception and allow them an abortion. However, there was a demand made that we put time limits on it. They shouldn't go full term and then suddenly decide, oh, no, I don't want to go through with this. The issue is that before the baby reaches viability, that it be terminated. And that's why this was offered.
So when does the baby reach viability?
Usually 20 weeks.
So you go all the way back to 8 weeks.
Well, that was for someone over 16, because by that time they would know.
It's still.
And it's 12 weeks with someone under 15 or younger.
It's still before viability. You do agree?
Pardon?
It's still before viability.
Yes.
You do agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So, why 8? Why not 18?
That's the way I didn't write the amendment. That's what the amendment says.
Okay, why? So you didn't do the 12 weeks either?
Pardon?
You didn't do the 12 weeks either?
The 12 weeks was a longer period of time for younger people.
For younger people.
Assuming that if this is brought to the attention of the authorities, there would be action taken earlier. But some of these are delayed in their recognition, or at least their reporting.
Right. Okay. So, Senator Glick, if you remember correctly, during the last legislative session, this body took up legislation to actually extend the time period for which a woman could actually claim rape. Do you remember that? You guys don't remember when a woman came forward and the man was 21 or older, but at the time the rape was done at 15 or 17, that they could claim and that person could be charged? Nobody on, well, maybe you're not on corrections committee.
Yeah, I'm on corrections. I think there was discussion of that, and I think that there was a bill that allowed the reporting.
Well, here's the question.
Okay.
Here's the question. Haven't we had bills where we've extended the period of time for which a woman could actually claim rape in this body?
Yeah, but we're not going to retroactively allow an abortion.
I didn't say that. I just said the woman claim. Forget the abortion part.
Okay.
This is the time period which she must come forward to claim rape or incest, right?
If she's pregnant. She still has the right to claim rape anytime, whatever the law says.
Right, I understand.
This does not affect the criminal law. This affects only if the victim of that rape is pregnant.
Right, okay, so we have extended the period of time. Do you believe that women come forward immediately after they've been raped?
Some women never come forward.
Thank you. So in doing this, by extending the period to say to 12 weeks, let's go to 16 years old. 8 weeks, do they know they're pregnant? Do most people know they're pregnant after 8 weeks?
16 should know.
A 16-year-old should know?
16-year-old should know that things aren't going the way they thought. And you have to also understand they've been through a traumatic experience, so they should have, at that point, reported it to someone someone in their support unit, if it's a parent, if it's an older adult, if it's the police, it should have been reported, but medical health could have interceded at this point. Many of these people, if it was a violent situation, they've gone to the police, they've been taken to a hospital according to protocol, they would have received probably the morning after pill or something to prevent conception. But this is a catch-all provision in the statute that the bill as it's offered does not have a time limit. This amendment was offered to put time limits in there so it wasn't open-ended.
Right, and I appreciate that. I just don't know why you came up with 8 weeks when, don't young girls, my daughters have gone through menstrual cycles. One of my daughters, we didn't even know that she was having a cycle, and she was 16 years old. She was 16 years old at the time. I find it hard to believe that you believe a 16-year-old should know if they're pregnant after 8 weeks. That's what you said. I'm trying to figure out where does that come from?
But these are individuals who've already had a rape or a violent act, which they're alleging.
Could be scared. They can be scared.
And so at this point in time, somebody's looking, somebody's involved in the situation.
Yeah, but what if they haven't reported? What if it's incest that's in the home? People are feeding them. They're 16 years old. Somebody's feeding them, and you think they're going to go to the police and tell them that, hey, my uncle who lives with us raped me, and within 8 weeks? I think that's what you're saying.
That's what the amendment says, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Yoder.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My question is, then who do I direct my questions to? Because what we're saying here is we don't know who is directing it. I don't think we heard one piece of testimony at all that used these numbers. It was either 0 weeks or do not put or no, or keep it the 20 weeks. But just to arbitrarily come up with 8 for 16 and older, and 8 weeks for 16 and older, and 12 weeks if you're under 16 years of age, is just making up numbers. What we did here is there's no difference in viability, whether it's 8 weeks outside the womb, whether it's 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks to 20 weeks. So I would like to see who is making this suggestion. Who do I direct my questions to? Where are these numbers coming from? Because not one person that we've heard from over the course of these 2 days has suggested these numbers. And then my second question is my concern about the affidavit, that we are asking women, girls, to sign an affidavit that will follow her for the rest of her life. That any judge, I guess I need to ask, could a judge in any county request this information, and could it be made public? And could this victim be further traumatized by having this come out in public? Could these records be made public by a judge?
If it's a juvenile, then the judge would have access to the records, but juvenile court records are sealed. If it's an adult, the records themselves are exempt from the Public Records Act, but if it was introduced at a trial, at an adult trial with an adult victim, then the tendency is to obscure the names, but I don't know that they would always obscure the names, meaning use initials instead of...
This is more trauma to someone who has already been a victim of trauma, whether that's rape or incest. And what we're saying here is what I'm saying is this affidavit, even though it says it's confidential, really doesn't mean anything. It could be re-traumatizing for women and girls to have to sign this affidavit, which is what we're saying both in, in this amendment. But then my concern is just the complete arbitrariness of the 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 years of age, 15 years of age. It's not a response to any of the expert testimony that we have received, and I cannot support this amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senator Lannon.
Thank you. Again, I don't know if it's a question or just a comment here about these timeframes here. Aside from the whole issue of, should we force a woman to have the child of a rapist, I agree. These timeframes here are not only arbitrary, but I think that they are ill thought of, because in most cases, you take the situation where the woman is over 16, and I don't have any statistics on this, but common sense tells me in most cases the rape victim is over 16. We're giving her only 8 weeks to make this crucial, important decision. And I presume the author of this amendment, this phantom amendment, whoever it is probably trying to limit abortions that will occur by virtue of putting this artificially quick timeline. But it also seems to me it may have the opposite effect. If I'm a woman who's been raped and I'm really thinking over this most important, personal, crucial question of, do I keep the baby or not? Oh, you've only given me 8 weeks. Hell, I just found out I'm pregnant, number one. Maybe I'm also in a non-rape relationship. I don't know whose baby this is. But the law says use it or lose it. I only have 8 weeks. I guess I'll have the abortion. I wonder if the author of this amendment thought about that. I think we ought to leave it the way it is in the bill, or at the most have the viability 20 weeks be the time frame. So I think this is an ill thought out amendment for that reason. Thank you.
We have a motion. Is there a second? If we have a motion and a second, please call the roll.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Taylor.
Of course. 1 minute.
1 minute. Yes, I know your 1 minute rule. My sister was 16 years old when she had her child. I think you guys have all heard the story. It wasn't a wanted child, but it's a tough situation. So when whoever put 16 in here, just tugged at my heart. And I've been trying to sit here and pray and think about what I was going to say. I just want you to know that these 16-year-old girls have been through a traumatic experience, and my sister still suffers today. But you're going to traumatize them again. At 16 years old. Well, no.
Senator Lannon.
No.
Senator Melton.
No.
Senator Yoder.
No.
Senator Messmer.
No.
Senator Bassler. Senator Cruz.
Aye.
Senator Holdman.
Aye.
Senator Glick. Senator Kreider. Senator Charbonneau. Passes 7-5.
Motion passes 7-5. I'll call. Since Senator Taylor is out for a moment, we'll give him a couple minutes. We've got amendment number 24. Will you please introduce that one quickly for us? Actually, let's start with 17, just to say in moderately numerical order.
Amendment 17 is the one that specifies that the reporting requirements that apply to abortions would also apply to terminating pregnancy of a fetus that was incapable of sustained life outside the womb.
Simply a reporting requirement so that we know kind of what that is, how often it's happening, just for information purposes only. Are there questions regarding the amendment? I see your motion. Is there a second? Second. Motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Senator Bray.
Yes. Yes, sorry.
Senator Taylor. No. Senator Lannon.
No.
Senator Melton.
No.
Senator Yoder.
No.
Senator Messmer.
Yes.
Senator Bassler.
Yes.
Senator Cruz.
Aye.
Senator Holdman.
Aye.
Senator Glick.
Aye.
Senator Kreider.
Yes.
Senator Charbonneau. Passes.
8 to 4.
8 to 4.
Motion passes 8 to 4. Senator Taylor, I'd call amendment number 5, which pertains to telehealth. Or is that something you or one of the members of your caucus want to speak to?
Mr. Chairman, that's my amendment.
Please, go ahead.
So I call amendment number 5, and this is, under current Indiana law, Hoosiers are not allowed to access medication-based abortion care through telehealth services, although the process is safe, efficient, and operating smoothly in 31 states. Women are capable of following their doctor's direction to successfully take abortion pills at home and make it through the process. There's no need to limit that ability. With the ban this excessive majority is about to put in place, it's more important than ever that women are able to access care as conveniently as possible within the confines of the law, and my amendment would repeal that prohibition on telehealth abortion care and access so that women who are victims of rape, incest, or have life-threatening complications have access to medical abortion pills within the time frame that this type of care is recommended to be administered, within the first 11 weeks of a pregnancy. This will lift an important barrier hindering women from accessing the care they need as soon as possible. Given that this service would still only be available to the women legally able to access abortion under Indiana's law, I see no reason why there would be any opposition to this measure, and I ask for all my colleagues' support on this amendment.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Senator Charbonneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the Health Committee over the last 3 years, we've been looking at the issue of telehealth and been very methodically, I think, expanding its use as we've gone through the last couple of years. And to this point in time, we have not seen fit as a health committee to expand telehealth into the area of abortion, medications, and I would at this point be against this amendment.
Is there further discussion, or what's the will of the committee?
Chairman, I have a question.
Senator Taylor.
For Senator Charbonneau. I'm not on health committee, so forgive me. Why not?
Well, there are all kinds of reasons why that we can't have chosen not to do certain things by telehealth, and you know, to this point, that is one of the ones that we have not expanded into that area yet. Again, there are many areas.
Can you just give me two?
Pardon me?
Can you give me two reasons?
Yeah.
I'm not on health committee, so
yeah,
please.
Again, we have looked at these things. We've discussed that in committee, and have chosen not, as a committee, not to do it at this point.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, can I?
I have a question.
Senator Glick.
I believe one of the concerns about telehealth would be there'd be no way to control that to Indiana doctors. So it would be an end run around the entire statutes governing abortions if you're going to let people, physicians outside the state of Indiana, outside of the jurisdiction, making all the medical, they're basically, people can consult with doctors outside of the state. People use medical websites all the time, but a telehealth medicine would connote that you were going to have a doctor prescribing the medications or making the recommendations, and you're simply taking them outside of the jurisdiction of the state of Indiana if you do it, because they could be wherever making those recommendations. Wouldn't even have to be in the continental United States.
Oh, whoa.
Hold on, Senator Yoder. Just a moment.
I do want to clarify, I know we discussed this in 2021, but this was not discussed in committee. I believe this was prohibiting telehealth to cover abortion medicine was banned on a second reading amendment on the floor. So it wasn't discussed. We didn't hear testimony that this is FDA approved, if this is best practice in the care of patients and for healthcare providers. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Senator Taylor.
Thank you. Senator Glick, did I hear you saying that we don't want doctors practicing medicine in Indiana that are not licensed in Indiana?
No, why would we? You're governing.
I was going to say, I agree with you.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there's let me make sure I want to understand this. You're saying that there's a doctor in another state that through telemedicine could practice in Indiana.
How long before you think that it would take for abortion providers to do everything by telehealth?
Wait a minute. You don't say that to diabetic medicine. Can I get my diabetes pill through telehealth?
I don't know.
Yeah, I can, because I do it. And so.
But we don't have a ban on diabetic medicine, do we?
No, we don't have a ban on abortion either.
We have limitations on abortion, and we have felony.
We have limitation on medicine all the time.
Okay.
We have limitations on who could. Do you really think, I'm struggling with asking you this, that doctors would practice and provide abortion pills in the state of Indiana, a licensed physician in another state?
We had doctors coming to Indiana for the specific purpose of conducting abortions, and the fact that they could do it out of state and suffer no repercussions. I think that's the purpose behind, not having telehealth. you don't know for sure who you're dealing with. You don't even know for sure in some of these cases that that is a physician.
You know, I don't, oh goodness. Listen, telemedicine and telehealth have come a long way. And you can't even get into your telehealth discussion unless you have a passcode and everything else. You know, the alligator in the mud puddle is starting to come very clear now. So you think abortion doctors from another country will dispense a pill over the phone with a person or over a computer with them? Is that what you're trying to say?
I think it is possible.
And it's possible for a doctor to give me medicine from another country too. But
And
you're not banning them.
Okay.
What's the will of the committee? Is there a motion? Is there a second? Call the roll.
Senator Bray.
No.
Senator Taylor.
Yes.
Senator Lannon.
Aye.
Senator Melton.
Yes.
Senator Yoder.
Aye.
Senator Messmer.
No.
Senator Bassler. Senator Cruz.
No.
Senator Holdman. Senator Glick.
No.
Senator Kreider. Senator Charbonneau.
No.
Fails 4-8.
Motion fails by a vote of 4 to 8. Motion number 7, will you introduce that one real quick?
Mr. Chair, we have number 6 as well, too.
I'm moving through some of these.
Oh, okay.
Motion number 7 is the bill that requires LSA to prepare legislation for next session to amend statutes pertaining to children to also apply to a fetus at any stage of development.
Senator Taylor, do you want to speak on that at all?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Throughout this entire process, the crux of the issue was when viability and when a viable fetus becomes a person. That's what the entire discussion has been about. That's why we have these 8-week and 12-week restrictions. If we're going to do that, then we should have support for them. For most of you who don't know, if you are pregnant in 2022 and you do not have your child until 2023, you do not get to take advantage of the child tax credit in the state of Indiana because the baby was born in 2023. And for the pro-life support that we see and that we've had discussed today, one of the pro-life things is about when the child is here. Child support. Child support is for the child. How can you not be for providing child support as early as possible in a child's life if you're pro-life? If you're not if you're pro-life, how can you be against this? Life insurance policies should be able to name that child as a beneficiary because it's a life. This is the pro-life opportunity to allow us to do something to help those little babies that we all know as a result of this legislation, more children will be born in the state of Indiana, and a no vote on this amendment is a no vote for the children that are here in this state. I ask for your support.
What's the will of the committee?
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Senator Bray,
No.
Senator Taylor,
Yes.
Senator Lannon,
Yes.
Senator Melton,
Yes.
Senator Yoder,
Aye.
Senator Messmer,
No.
Senator Bassler, Senator Cruz,
No.
Senator Holdman,
No.
Senator Glick, Senator Kreider, Senator Charbonneau. Fails 4-8.
Motion fails by a vote of 4-8. Let's call amendment number 24. Would you describe that briefly for us?
So amendment number 24 deals with the affidavit, and it does two things. The first is that it specifies that the affidavit will be required to be signed by the woman. And second, it specifies that the affidavit will be placed in the woman's permanent health record.
Yeah, why don't you? Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you.
One other thing I want to point out, because amendment number 2 was adopted, which set up the timeline, the two timelines, there are then two affidavits. So if this is adopted, the committee report will need to change this so that it applies to both of the affidavits that will exist under the new bill rather than the one affidavit that exists in the bill currently.
Is there discussion on this amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Taylor?
is there an author?
Senator Glick, do you want to discuss it briefly?
This is the requirement that was requested by the caucus, that the affidavit be signed by the woman and that it be attached to the medical records so that it would be available to any physician treating that woman in the future.
Which affidavit?
The affidavit that the requirement that she says that she was raped, she has to say that under oath. We're not requiring, under the bills it stands right now, there's no requirement that there be a filing for, stating that there was a criminal act, although we're anticipating in most cases there will be. We do know that there's a substantial numbers of rapes which go unreported at the choice of the victim, and we're not compelling them to do it in order to seek care. What we're saying is there must be an affidavit, there must be something under oath stating that this happened before they can seek an abortion.
So if they're under 16, you want them to sign an affidavit?
They can sign an affidavit if they understand the truth and the difference between truth and falsehood. The law recognizes that, and if they can't, then there's provisions in the law for the court to take that into account.
So if a 14-year-old is being a victim of incest, you want them to sign under penalties of perjury an affidavit before they can seek an abortion?
They can be, if they're under the treatment of a physician, then they have to sign an affidavit, or they have to go before a court. There will be, if at that point, if they're presented to a physician, there would be a Department of Family and Children person present, and that would be taken before the court.
So let me make sure I understand this right. First of all, they have to know they're pregnant before 12 weeks. We've already got that amendment in, right?
Yeah.
Then you want them to go through then if they're the victim of incest, a 14-year-old, you want them to go through the process of signing an affidavit saying possibly that my parent has actually had sex with me, or a family member. I just want to make sure I get this right. You want them to not only have to be at 12 weeks to tell somebody, but now you want them, when they tell somebody, to sign an affidavit to make sure that they're not lying.
We want to establish that they are speaking the truth and they're saying that this is what occurred. It's attached their medical records, and that's where it remains. It's confidential. In terms of the young person, there is the possibility that there has to be an adult present, or there has to be the authority of the court.
What if it's
a consent of the guardian? And if that guardian,
it's incest.
That's why they're represented by someone from the Department of Family and Children, and they have the courts involved.
I understand that
everyone in this process is not lying, Senator Taylor. We can't presume that. Why were you having them
sign an affidavit?
Because
why have them sign an affidavit at 14 years old? They can't sign a contract, Senator Glick.
We're asking them for the truth, and they can establish whether or not they're telling the truth. They're not entering into a contract here.
Can they sign a contract at 14?
No, but they
have to sign a legal document
under oath in court, and they can testify if they know the difference between truth and falsehood.
Okay, I'm going to have Mr. Hedges talk real quickly to that question. Mr. Hedges, would you do that, please?
Sure. This just deals with basically the competency of children to sign affidavits. Both Evidence Rule 601 and IC 344521 say that all witnesses are presumed competent, and children testify under oath in cases all the time.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Hold on, Senator Taylor, let him finish.
So this is different from contracts because children under 18 are not bound by contracts, but they can be bound by oaths. So.
Can I speak?
Yes.
So can people who are mentally ill as well. Am I correct? Under that same rule, trial rule?
There's a presumption that they are competent, but depending on the issue,
Thank you. All right, I'm familiar with that. Thank you for the clarification. But going back to my point on this 14-year-old signing an affidavit, obviously it's legal for them to sign it, but do you understand the trauma you are putting them through by having them sign a document saying that they were raped by a family member? Senator Glick.
Yes.
Okay. So, just so I understand, and this is supposed to be a pro-life stance that you're taking. Senator Glick.
I understand.
Is this a pro-life position, you believe?
Yes. I mean, once again, there were allegations are being made. We are not under the bill as it stands right now. There's no requirement that there be charges of rape or incest filed. However, they're asking for an abortion under this bill. We're saying we want some documentation of what occurred that justifies an abortion.
So you just brought up my next question. Where's the enforcement part of this?
Lying under oath is illegal.
No, not to the victim of the rape or incest, to the person who committed it.
If they're lying, and someone could prove that they're lying, then there are repercussions. But we don't.
Senator Taylor, the commission of a rape is entitled 35.
But this doesn't lend itself to anybody reporting to an authority that this person has been raped or victim of incest. There's nothing that requires the person to report this. And I'm asking why there is not that consideration in this amendment.
It's not required under this. If you want to amend the amendment, I guess that's up to you.
Well, I think our
Again, I'm
minutes-
going to ask Mr. Hedges to address that just quickly, if he would.
Sure. There's a criminal provision in 3133 something that requires everyone to report instances of child abuse or neglect. Not just physicians, but everyone.
Not just the physician, but anyone who sees the affidavit.
Right. Everyone is not everyone who knows about child abuse.
Glad you
and neglect
covered
is a
that.
mandatory reporter.
Okay, Senator Glick, that adds to my questions then. So now you've got the victim who's 14 years old, the person who either raped her or is charged with incest is now going to be picked up and possibly serve 3 years in prison, or presumption of 3 years. Rape. Level 5, or I believe it's a level 5. Am I correct? Depending on what happened in the rape, I understand. But now, after she signs the affidavit, now the mandatory reporter, which I thought doctors were, thank you, Mr. Hedges, now they're going to go pursue this person.
Do you have a problem with the report of a rape?
Not at all.
Or incest?
I have no problem at all.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that's what you're intending here.
I want to protect the child. I want to protect the woman. I want to protect violence against both of them.
Which child?
Which child?
The unborn child or the child that's having the child?
I want to protect everyone in the process.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Senator Yoder?
I have some questions about this confidentiality and a permanent existence in a woman's health record. Who has access to medical health record?
You want to answer that? I believe it's just that would be in the health record, which of course is confidential. But any additional physician that would have access to the young lady's or the woman's health record would be able to see that and then treat them as a result of that.
And speaking of treatment, the amount of stigmatization that goes on around issues of rape and incest, and to further traumatize a girl and then a woman for the rest of her life. I just remember the last couple of cycles of elections, people had to make their medical records public. And can you imagine, this becomes a permanent part of their health record. And I take our state to be a state that we want people to aspire and fulfill their greatest dreams that they want for their lives. And if this would ever become public or would be made public, I think it's erroneous to assume that this is going to be confidential when we just discussed that at any point in time, a judge can make this record, can request this record, and then it can become public. I know that we want to protect young people, but this is not the way to do it. Requiring them, what we're saying is, well, if you're not telling the truth, we're coming after you. And in that is the truth is that we don't believe victims. Can you imagine having to sign an affidavit that your father impregnated you, and you have to sign a document as if it wasn't enough to come forward and say this was happening? And now it's a part of your permanent record. That every single person, I mean, just me personally, the amount of times I've had to change healthcare providers, and every single step along the way, they have access to this information. In the state of Indiana, we are already at a crisis for access to healthcare providers. and the number of times that individuals have to change healthcare providers, and every step along the way, this is being communicated via this permanent health record. We are asking children and women, girls and women, to be re-traumatized multiple times a year, with this being a part of their permanent record. These affidavits are, we didn't hear one person over the last 2 days ask for this change. And I cannot even fathom that someone in your caucus said, I either need to see this in this bill or I can't support it. It's unconscionable. I cannot support this amendment.
I think it's more unconscionable to think that a rapist or an incestuous relative can conduct themselves in such a way that they impregnate someone with any, if you're not going to have the victim come speak and say under oath, this happened to me, and this is not being published, if you will. This is placed or attached to a medical record because future treatment of that person is going to be dependent on knowing what their medical history is.
Fine,
and
but
the
that's
fact
not
that
what this
it's
is.
going to the court does not mean it's being published, but reporting is essential if we're going to take those people off the streets who would perpetrate violence against women and children.
And
Senator.
Fine, but that's not what this amendment is. That's not what this amendment is.
What's the will of the committee?
Move the amendment.
There's a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Taylor.
My vote, Mr. Chairman.
Sure,
Less than 1 minute. Less than 1 minute. I really thought that when we started this process, we were going to go down the road to protect these young women and use girls and women. I see what the strategy is here, and I'm not going to support it. And this amendment is the first step that we're going to take. I think I just figured out where we're going with this, but this is dangerous. Police and law enforcement have to get their hands on it in order to prosecute. We've got somebody who has a law enforcement background that knows that, and we're going to sit here and make it seem like this is just going to be in her record. Senator Yoder, this is not just going to be in her record. This is going to be in a law enforcement officer's hands in the same town where she lives when they bring the criminal charges against that person who committed incest or raped her. This is terrible. No.
Senator Lannon? No. Senator Melton? No. Senator Yoder?
No.
Senator Messmer?
Yes.
Senator Bassler? Senator Cruz?
Aye.
Senator Holdman? Aye. Senator Glick?
Aye.
Senator Kreider? No. Senator Charbonneau? Aye. Passes 7-5.
Motion passes 7-5. That is all the amendments the chair is going to entertain today. We can have discussion with regard to the bill.
Point of order.
Go ahead, Senator Taylor.
There are several other amendments that we'd like to discuss. Has the chairman made the unilateral decision that you will not hear these amendments?
The chairman has made the decision not to move those. So we discuss the bill and its passage. Is there discussion on the bill? Senator Taylor.
Move the bill as amended.
Senator Taylor, you can discuss the bill.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. We don't have, this is interesting, most interesting process, we don't have a committee report that shows what the changes are. I don't know what other technical changes might be in there. But here's the interesting part about this piece of legislation. The changes that we made today for those who supported those amendments is we've decided that there's an arbitrary time period that a woman should come forward and say that she's either been the victim of rape or incest. This isn't because we have some kind of scientific idea as to why it's that time period. It's because whoever wrote the bill in the first place left out a time limitation. And it would have allowed, which we do every session, we come, as a matter of fact, last session we redefined rape to open it up. And as Senator Yoder has said it so eloquently, some of these young women don't even know they've been raped. They think, hey, I was drinking and that dude, I went to his apartment with him and, you know, yeah, we started messing around and I didn't even know that that was rape. Or this boyfriend of mine that I've had for 5 years who's telling me, you know, this is what you're going to do, doesn't understand that that coercion could be considered rape. But we're going to limit rape to 12 weeks when it comes to abortion. So I just figured out what the issue is. The issue is not protecting women, it's about abortion. Because everything else that we do with rape gives the woman more time. Everything we've done has given her more access to bring charges. But when it comes to the fact that as a result of that rape, that a child could possibly be created, we change our mind. Oh, that's not pro-life. That's not pro-life. And if you believe it is, just go through the process like I've had to go through with family members of mine to talk about the trauma that's created for a 16-year-old who's been raped. And as a result of that rape, there was a child. And then you decide to have it. For those of you who have never experienced it, it's traumatic every day. But you love your child because it's a seed. If my sister would have given up my nephew to adoption, which is what we thought she was going to do, but when he came out, he looked just like me. And she couldn't do it. But you know what? The guy who did it to her is still walking around. And guess what? My nephew actually has a relationship with them. You have no concept of what this requires. Hours of love and cherishment. People, extended family members. I love my nephew. I love the fact that there was not a choice. She didn't make that choice. She kept him. But by God, she didn't even tell us until after he was born. She wasn't gonna tell me 12 weeks. She knows I would have. She knows what I would have done. You gonna tell this 16-year-old girl that she got to do it within 12 weeks? How dare we?
Senator Lannon.
I'll make my comments very brief on this. I was struck by the fact that I don't know how many people we had testify on this bill, probably 50 or so. I think one person liked this bill. Nobody wants this bill. Now, I understand the anti-choice people think it's too lenient. The pro-choice people, and I identify with them, this takes away your rights. But, you know, we were scheduled to have a special session. So we come down here, we're going to rush this bill through because of the pressure that everybody feels after the Supreme Court decision to do something. I'm not surprised this bill is fatally flawed. Quite frankly, look at the composition of this state Senate, 16% female, 84% male. Same way on this committee. 2 members out of the 12, female. Got a bunch of men that don't really even understand the female body and what's going on when it comes to pregnancy and things like that. They're going to legislate on this. But I just think this is a sad day, I think, for the state of Indiana. It's a sad day for the Indiana Senate, because we're going to advance, I assume, this piece of legislation which reverses the rights of the women of the state of Indiana for 50 years to control their own body. And instead, we're going to say the Indiana General Assembly is going to make this decision for you. And even if you're raped, you got 8 weeks. And to me, that is just so wrong. The exceptions here are poorly thought out. So for that reason, and the reason that I believe it's wrong that we take this right away from the citizens of the state of Indiana, I think it's going to be harmful. We've heard testimony. It's going to be harmful to our economy. I'm going to vote no.
Senator Melton.
Just express a few thoughts real quick, Mr. Chair. We've heard a couple of days of testimony. I'm still even processing yesterday. That's why I've kind of listened and observed from the folks that have testified today. A couple of things that stood out to me as I was taking notes, and I took a couple of quotes that someone said. I am a full and autonomous woman. That was one quote. Another quote said, and I'm paraphrasing this one, you listen to a lawyer for legal advice, and I urge others to listen to doctors for medical advice and not the government. And that's why it's extremely hard as we sit and have these conversations today, because like Senator Lannon mentioned, here we have a panel of legislators that are, to my knowledge, none of us are healthcare professionals or have that experience. So I lean on those professionals to give us advice, and I would say overwhelmingly most of the healthcare professionals do not support this legislation. But one of the most things I'm definitely disappointed in today is not hearing the amendments. One amendment thought that was reasonable was the religious exemption amendment that I would have offered. When we heard the testimony yesterday, especially from the rabbi that represented the Jewish community, and I asked for their statement, and I want to just briefly just share what stood out to me, and I'm not going to take long, Mr. Chair. Proposals, and this is from the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council and Indiana Board of Rabbis, and I quote, proposals that ban abortion, including in cases of rape, incest, or undue risk to the pregnant woman, infringe on the separation of religion and state and prohibit members of the Jewish community from freely exercising deeply held religious principles. And that's why I thought my amendment would have been reasonable, because I went back and I flashed back on us not that long ago when we were debating the vaccine. And there were folks in the hallways that were advocating, don't force me to get vaccinated. So I thought this amendment would have been the same logic used during the vaccination conversation that would have exempted individuals because of their religious belief for not taking the vaccine. And in closing, I want to thank one of my constituents that sent me a letter, Mr. Roki, which is a chaplain in one of our hospitals, that expressed her concern, and I will share that testimony with you all. So today it is extremely disappointing that looks like we're going to be moving forward, but I just urge us as we continue to move forward, let's not make this a political issue. Let's truly listen to the people, to the Hoosiers. Let's not project our narrow or personal perspective on this because we want to impact lives across the entire board. It's not just the folks that we see on a day-to-day basis. This is the millions of Hoosiers that live in this state.
Senator Glick and then Senator Yoder.
For the purposes of this bill and this body, this is a bill, as we've seen, that no one can agree on all the terms of. It's a vehicle bill. It has some strong points, it has some weak points. There have been innumerable witnesses, and almost nobody agrees that it's a perfect bill. Some, such as the Right to Life National Group, say there's nothing about it, that it's any good whatsoever. However, this is the first step in a long process that includes several areas and times that's going to come before this body for second reading and hopefully third reading. Second reading would allow anyone in the chamber to offer amendments that they will have to get up and defend. And if there were amendments that weren't heard today, they can be brought to second reading if it passes out of committee. And I think there will be multiple amendments. Am I happy with the bill? Not exactly, nor was I happy when it was drafted. This is a very difficult process, but it's a very difficult issue. And it involves some of the most intimate things that could possibly be discussed. I'm asking for support from this committee to bring it to the floor so that we can discuss it in detail, and if it's the will of the body to kill the bill on the floor, then so be it. But it's a start. We have a bill in place in Indiana right now. It is not broad enough for some people in this chamber, and it's too broad for many of the people both in this chamber and out in that hallway. But it's a process. And even if this bill gets through the Senate of Indiana, it still has to go across the rotunda, and it will be examined and re-examined and dissected, and testimony will be taken again. I ask the support of the committee for the passage of this bill.
Thank you, Senator Glick. Senator Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to just speak on the issue of time. And so many Hoosiers took time off of work, away from their own families, to come down over the last 2 days to protest, to testify. And we did not take the time to hear from all of them. But we had the time. We were called into session July 6th, and we could have made time to hear from each of them. Now, you could say, well, how much different would all of the testimonies have been? And I would say to each and every one of those individuals, their story is important, which is why we take testimony, so that we can hear from our constituents, hear from Hoosiers. And to not be able to do that is, it's just undermining democracy and looks poorly on the care I know that we bring to our jobs every single day. I mean, we each had a packet of testimony on our desks today. I know you've received tons, but even today, people who didn't get a chance to testify yesterday and today, I've been receiving texts, phone calls, and emails from, and to them, I am very sorry, because we could have made the time. And then the time that, the arbitrariness of all of the, this many days, this many weeks. And I personally feel that it's interesting, because you could look at this another way and say, if you think there needs to be this time limit of either 8 weeks or 12 weeks, give people time to process what they're about to do. We've had so many women have the courage to come up and share their stories. I will share mine. I got pregnant and did not know what to do. I needed time to process this information. I was not partnered, I was not married. I was humiliated, embarrassed. I was ashamed. I should know better. Why weren't you taking your birth control appropriately? Why were you having sex outside of marriage? The shame went on and on and on that I felt. What I needed was time and the ability to make the decision that was right for me. And I had multiple conversations. And I haven't shared this because people who choose differently, their decision should be just as respected. I chose to have my child. I chose to carry out that pregnancy. But I needed that time, and we are restricting that time for people to process. And in the case of rape and incest, there's no amount of time to be able to process that, but restricting it is the absolute wrong direction. And then to make them sign an affidavit is just bad policy. There are many things that stand out as problematic in this bill. I am disturbed that we did not hear the only person who came out in support of this bill in the last 2 days was actually someone who was being sarcastic. They didn't support it. They were trying to be funny, and it wasn't funny. We had the time, but what we don't have is trust in women. We don't have the ability to respect women to do the right thing that's right for them. We don't understand, nor do we respect a woman's right to personal autonomy, to have these difficult conversations, and then to make the right decision. For that reason, I cannot support this bill, and I ask my colleagues to do the same.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Is there further discussion? What's the will of the committee?
Move the bill as amended.
Please call the roll.
Senator Bray.
Yes.
Senator Taylor.
Can I get my 1 minute?
1 minute.
Thank you. Senator Bray, Chairman Bray, my colleagues from the other side of the aisle, I don't envy your position. As a matter of fact, I kind of watched today and I looked at, like, I don't know, I seem to be a good reader of body language in my old age. And most of you are not comfortable with what we just did. But you're going to do it because it's part of the process. As a matter of fact, Senator Glick said it's a vehicle bill. Well, Senator Glick, I wish that this was a vehicle bill. This is about a constitutional right that women have had for 50 years, that you had when you could have children, that most of the women in this body had when they were at childbearing age. And guess what? The women who fought before you so you could be in this position are probably turning over in their graves because they never had that right. And you're going to take it away. And I can tell you this, as somebody who I know I had to fight and claw to be sitting where I'm sitting, I will never do that to my ancestors. The last thing that I wanted to have happen was for this bill to come out of this committee and go to the floor of the Senate. And it should be the last thing that you want, because now you've got about 38 other members that get to chime in. You think that's going to help this bill? You haven't even gotten over to the other side. The best thing for this bill to do is to be gone. You're treading on very sensitive waters, and I hope you don't drown. I vote no.
Senator Lannon.
Explain my vote. I believe the Supreme Court was wrong. I believe that this bill is wrong. I don't believe in taking away the rights of people. And that's exactly what this bill does. It makes our state look bad, and I vote no.
Senator Milton.
Explain my vote, Mr. Chair.
Of course, 1 minute.
I want to thank all those that came out to testify over the last couple of days. I've truly learned a lot about this entire process, about the health care of women. I learned that there are so many reasons why a woman may need to have an abortion, and it has taught me, and I'm continuing and want to learn more. I say this as a father, as a husband. I truly trust the women in this state to make their own decisions about their health care, and that's why I vote no on this bill.
Senator Yoder.
Explain my vote.
Of course, 1 minute.
This bill is not about life. This is about control. It's also putting into jeopardy the separation of church and state. Listening to the last 2 days of testimony, I mean, it's life-changing. And I will forever be thinking about these women's stories, these men's stories. But at the end of the day, having access to abortion care as one of the options is critical when accessing reproductive health care. And moving in this direction and banning abortions in Indiana is what we know is not what Hoosiers want. Over 80% of Hoosiers have told us this. And for that, I will be voting no.
Senator Messmer.
Explain my vote.
Yes, you have 1 minute, Senator Messmer.
This is one of the most complex issues any of us will ever try to tackle in our lifetime, and this just demonstrates the near impossibility of threading the perfect needle in a compressed, short special session schedule. Of the 60 people that testified, none were in support of the bill. One was sarcastically, and I have been yet to be contacted. Every pro-life organization has asked me to vote no on this bill. And with that, I vote no.
Senator Bassler.
Of course, Senator Bassler, you have 1 minute.
There are many reasons not to support this bill on many different levels. And this might be the first time in my 8 years in this building that I vote yes in hopes of simply seeing a better version of it when it comes to the floor. So my hope is that this group or some group of us will be able to come up with some amendments for second reading that make this a better bill. Because if we don't, I won't be voting on the floor like I'm going to be voting today. But today, Mr. Chairman, I vote yes.
Senator Cruz.
Aye.
Senator Holdman. Senator Glick. Senator Kreider. Senator Charbonneau.
Explain my vote.
Of course, Senator Charbonneau, 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've sat here over the last 2 days getting physically sick to my stomach about the discussion that I've heard, and I don't know where the end point is, because after 2 days of testimony, no one has been able to or willing to shift from two very extreme positions. And that leaves us with the job of trying to figure out what to do with an extremely emotional, extremely volatile, and you can just go down the list. It's very divisive in every aspect. I'm a very devout Catholic and go to church every Sunday, so I mean it. But I struggle with some of the testimony that we've heard over the last 2 days. And how can that be right? And how can religious freedom only apply to certain religions? I struggle with that. This is a process. We've all talked about the process. We have what I think everybody believes is a bad bill. And I'm going to vote yes today. And I guess my wish is that we make a bad bill less bad. I vote yes.
Bill passes 7-5.
Bill passes 7-5. I want to thank everybody, certainly the public, for being here and their engagement in this in a very passionate but ruly and an effective way. I want to thank members of the committee as well. Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? All in favor say aye. Aye. The Rules Committee is now adjourned.